Fuck it, we ball. Hello, everyone. Okay, same rules as normal. I may not respond actively while I'm narrating. The clicks are for dialogue for other characters, so unfortunately, you're gonna have to wait until the full thing comes out to get the rest of the story. We left off. Cal, hello. We just left off with chapter 4, and then chapter 5 is Finn's. So unfortunately, you guys don't get to know anything about that chapter. If you have read book 2, you're in luck, and if you have not read book 2, I would implore you to do that. There's plenty of time before the audiobook comes out. Right now, I'm doing everything that I can to try to get this buttoned up so that we can start moving into full production. Hey, hello. And get the rest of the lines for Mr. Creepypasta, Spike, and the amazing Joey Sorless, who has made an absolutely phenomenal Finn, and we are honored to have him on board. So if you need any voice acting work, and you need a very diverse, phenomenal voice actor, Joey is absolutely solid. Could not have found a better fit for Finn, in my opinion. Oh, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that, Dark. That's good. I'm glad to hear that, Rat. So, I'm not going to dally too much. Hey, Freya. I appreciate you, New York. It's weird for me to stream right now, so don't worry about it. Oh, I hate it. I expect to get interrupted at least 10 times, but I need to try to get this done. I'm a little better today. Still tired, but definitely better. All right. Appreciate you. All right. Me too, man. Oh God, Kel. Oh, good luck. Please stop crying. I already warned everybody that I'm not ready because this is the one that I fucked up and had a really bad time when I first narrated this with the black hole. And I told everybody yesterday that I was terrified to get to that section in this book because I knew that you had kind of embellished and elaborated on a lot of shit. And that was very personal to me. So I was like, I know. I told everybody that I was like, dog, I don't know if I can narrate that one live because I'm going to be fucking crying on stream trying to like get my shit together. So it's all right. We're going to do the damn thing. Okay. So as usual, I appreciate you guys being patient. Again, I will not be actively replying while I am live narrating. So just be patient with me. Again, like I said, and it's down in the little corner right there. Clicks are going to be for dialogue. But if you guys would like to invest in, actually, let me do that really quick here. I'm gonna grab you guys a thing. So if you haven't had the opportunity to pick up the novels for A Lonely Broadcast, they are available on Amazon via Kindle, or you can get yourself a live copy. They are also actually available on... Hold on, let me grab Kel's thing too. I believe they're also available, which honestly, I would implore you to support Kel directly, but mostly just don't give Daddy Amazon, the money or whatever. But this is Kel's website. Oh, are we not doing this? Are we? Oh, I guess I'll go fuck myself. Hold on. Oh, fuck you then. I did that. Oh, you salty bitch. It's fine. It's fine. Can I not? For some reason, I can't control V. I'm not sure why. Doesn't matter. We're just gonna do this. There. I think that'll work. Let me see. Yeah, that works fine. All right, kelbyron.com. Super simple, but that way you're supporting Kel directly and not giving money to Daddy Amazon. All right. Hello. I couldn't control, I couldn't copy paste. I don't know. That's the other thing is I'm on my Mac. I actively record on my Mac, so everything is super fucky. So, what do you mean? What do you mean, me? Stealing company? Stealing time from the company? I would never. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a benefit when you can do that for authors. In some cases though, unfortunately, it's hit or miss because you're also your own marketing. So, the money's not always guaranteed, which can be rough. So, all right. I didn't do dick to warm up my voice. So we're going in raw or whatever. Testing one. Testing one. I didn't think about this, but technically I could probably show you guys Evelyn is best served raw. You right? I guess I could show you guys kind of the way. Let me see if I can do this. Hold on. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a behind the scenes kind of deal. I tried to do this last time, so it may not work. But let me see if I can get it to. Whoa, my God. All right, hold on. Hold. Can I? Oh. Hey, all right, cool. This is how we're going to do it. You guys, just in case you have any interest in watching the little wavy lines for fun. Give you guys something interesting to look at while we're doing this. Pause for dramatic effect, yeah. Yeah, rest days are fucking important for sure. Okay. Yeah, you know what? Fuck it. That looks good. Why not? Okay, cool. This is actually kind of like I'm here for this. This is interesting. Okay. This is Adobe Audition. So I have my feelings and thoughts about Adobe, but it's the program that I learned on and I learned the best, and so it's just subsequently what I've used. Reaper is a similar free program that is also usable. Yeah, watch those wavy lines like jingling keys. Okay, so let's do this. Testing one. Testing one. You guys also kind of get a behind the scenes thing. Okay, let's go ahead and do this. Okay. Pray for me. Chapter 6. Vigil. Evelyn. I kept my radio on every night since the fog warning. In hindsight, it wasn't a great idea if I wanted to sleep peacefully ever again. You see, I had two modes on nights like these. The first was the most common. I would lie awake on the couch, staring down at the small TV sitting on the living room floor, the room cast in a blue glow for hours. Falling snow would keep me company, and I'd listen for sounds from the floor below, wondering if Daniel was in his bed. The second option was rare, restless sleep. I could never escape the nightmares, though. The first time I had a dream about the day before my father disappeared. I still vividly remembered the look on his face, and the resolution in his eyes giving me all the signs that he knew he wasn't coming back. Those were signs I was way too young to read. This time, I dreamt about the basement. The clouds were moving fast that day. I sat on the tire swing outside our old farmhouse, next to a fence with peeling white paint. The ropes of my swing made an eerie creak as I moved slowly, back and forth with the changing wind. I kicked off the tree to swing faster, my jeans tucked into my little boots and one lace untied. When I sat on that swing, I always thought of my father pushing me, letting me go higher and higher before he finally caught me and spun me around until I got dizzy. I sat there waiting for him to find me every day. I heard the siren first. It was a low, mutated sound that was muffled by the trees and carried an unnatural echo. I stopped swinging and looked up at the sky, expecting to see storm clouds rushing in, as images of cyclones and hurricanes came to mind. For a moment, I thought I felt raindrops on my face, but it was only the static in the air. "Evelyn!" My mother rushed out of the house, wiping her wet hands on her apron. When she got to me, she dropped her voice down to one that was quiet and urgent. She smelled like dish soap. "Len, it's time to go. Come on, take my hand." When she wrapped her fingers around my tiny fist, her hand was shaking. I didn't understand why she was so afraid. "It's not even raining yet, Evelyn Faye, you are coming with me, right now." I rarely heard such sternness from her. Beneath her mossy green eyes, I saw more wrinkles than usual. It was a level of stress and panic that I didn't understand. Flub, hold on. It was a level of stress and panic that I didn't yet understand. Mother pulled me toward the house, shoving me inside before she began bolting the front door with quick, shivering hands. She pushed a chair against it, wedging the back beneath the door handle with practiced precision. "Ma, what's going on?" I was standing on the other side of the room, wringing my hands together. I still had Dad's coat on. "Why are there sirens?" "A bad storm is coming," she said, walking over to me and bending at the knees. She pushed my hair back, tucking flyaway strands behind my ears. "But it's going to be okay. We'll make it a game, all right? Remember last time?" "The snowstorm?" I asked. "Yeah, baby, the snowstorm." My mom grabbed my hand tightly before pulling me toward the basement door. She turned off the lights and handed me a flashlight instead. "Go downstairs. Sit in the corner. I'll be right down and we'll play the shadow game, okay?" I nodded my head, glancing out the window at the heavy clouds rolling in over the treetops. No. Not clouds. "Evelyn!" My mother's voice was stern now. She snapped her fingers in my face. "Downstairs! Right now!" I did as I was told, looking back only once to see her closing the curtains one at a time with urgent speed. By the time I found a dark corner to sit in, avoiding spider webs and a damp spot on the concrete, she was following after me with a radio in her hand. The basement door closed and locked from the inside. As a little kid, I never questioned why we had so many locks down there. I thought everyone did. She tried to distract me, making shadow puppets on the walls, and I never questioned why she told me to only speak in a whisper. When I heard a bang on the roof of the house or felt a shake in the wooden beams overhead, she told me it was hail. I never saw any hail. Sometimes the storm would last only moments. Other times we sat there for an hour or more, making a game out of holding our breath and staying as still as possible. That day, I wished my dad was there. He always made the best shadow puppets. The crackle of the radio brought everything back to life. The fog warning was over, the DJ said. I remembered thinking that she was new, and I hadn't gotten used to her voice yet. Why did they change so often? "Mama, I said, once the doors were unlocked and the blinds were open. "Can I go back outside and play?" My mom was still shaken, but she nodded her head. "Sure, baby," she said. "Just be careful and don't wander. Stay in the yard." I skipped down the steps of our porch, noticing sticks and twigs scattered about from the heavy winds. The ground was dry, and there were no chunks of hail for me to gawk at and wonder, only a collection of holes in the ground near the foundation of the house. Had something been digging? My heart sank with disappointment when I spotted my favorite tree. Its branches were cracked. The tire swing snapped off its rope. It was deflated and lying on the ground in ruined pieces, slashed apart as if a giant had torn it open with massive claws. I'd have to ask Dad to fix it when he got back. I woke up with a sore back, having curled myself up into a tiny ball on the couch. I opened my eye and saw only fabric and an indent from my face. In that moment, I felt small. Young. It was like I wasn't used to my grown-up body yet and could have convinced myself that I'd just fallen asleep in front of the TV at my parents' house. My eye was wet with unshed tears as I thought about that tire swing. That day before the fog rolled in was the last time I ever used it, before it was torn down and never fixed. In a way, it was the end of my childhood. It was the end of my innocence, my curiosity for the woods, and the very last time I ever waited for my dad to come home. Somewhere deep down, I knew he never would. A small sob caught my ears. It wasn't my own. The tingle that I felt from the icy cold wind turned into another type of chill. Right away, I knew I wasn't alone in that room. The sorrow of my dream soon turned to a gut-wrenching, haunting type of dread. Something was there. It was watching me sleep. I stayed perfectly still, my face still pressed against the musty old fabric, as I listened to the slow, uneven shuffling of feet across the carpet and the buzz of insects. My breath was shaky. I knew I was trembling, but I still covered my face and pretended to be asleep. Maybe if I didn't acknowledge the thing, it would simply go away. I started to curse my own imagination when I conjured up an image to the sounds I heard. A figure dragging its leg behind it, pulling itself along while quietly sobbing and gasping for breath. As if on cue, I heard a sharp inhale from clenched lungs. Something was struggling to breathe, choking on wet debris and wheezing through holes in its throat. That sudden gasp of breath made me jump, and when my shoulders moved and my skin prickled with goosebumps, the drag of feet stopped. Silence. Then its steps got just a little faster. My whole body froze when I imagined it pulling itself toward me, curious and desperate. Maybe hungry. That rattling breath came again, louder and more urgent than before, as if the stalker in my apartment had finally taken notice. It moved with purpose now, and I could smell it. Forest decay, sour rot, and a stomach-churning sweetness like spoiled fruit. My pulse was an uneven, quickening drum, but all of my focus went to taking uniform breaths. I almost succeeded, but then I felt a chill. Something was leaning in above me, hovering. Closer and closer still. Insects flew around my head, curiously poking at my ears and landing on my shoulders as if daring me to shake them off. They tickled my nose, they crawled in my hair, they crept across my trembling lips. And yet, I remained frozen, trying to pretend I didn't feel the way their wings and tiny legs teased my clammy skin. The voice was right in my ear, rattling with every pained breath and tiny whimper. I could even make out the sounds of lips parting and a wet, slimy tongue tracing over teeth in anticipation. Its hair tickled my face like cobwebs. It was then that my mind created a horrible image of something tall and thin leaning over my head, just waiting and begging for me to open my eye or move an inch. It wouldn't leave. Finally, I couldn't resist. My eyes slowly cracked open, only the tiniest bit at first. In an instant, I watched a flash of long, stringy hair exit my view, the thing deciding to stand up and back away in a flourish as if startled. It gave one last gasp of breath, leaving behind the scent of rotten meat and blood. And it was gone. I sat up, eye darting around the room as if I would catch a glimpse of a pale, ghostly leg or a back turned, but the visitor left no clues, no signs, no evidence other than a tingle in my spine and a slowly fading scent. The radio had turned off at some point in the night. I flicked the switch and gave it a small shake as the station cleared, listening to Daniel's choice of soft, midnight music on the lowest volume setting. For a while, I didn't move, sitting there on the floor by the sofa with my back to the wall, and my eyes on the door brought back a wave of nostalgia. Moonlight bathed the room in a cast of dark blue. In my mind, there was white noise and old music. Eventually, I would go back to sleep. This time, as I curled up on the couch, I pulled the blanket over my head and tucked my toes in securely. It was a freezing, overcast, murky Monday morning when we got the final count. 12 people disappeared on the night of the invasion. 12 people were pulled to the forest and never came back. I got the news while I was at my apartment, folding laundry with my dad's old radio still on. Daniel was on his own at the station, and listening in on his broadcast seemed like the only way I could keep him company from afar. I'd text him between songs just to let him know I was still listening, and to make requests of my own, if only to annoy him a little bit. Play the SpongeBob theme song, I dare you. He never listened to my requests. But when I was done pestering Daniel, Finn was the one who gave me the bad news. He called me, interrupting some Pink Floyd while I sat on the floor and sorted my socks. Yellow. Finn was straight to the point. I could hear construction and barking dogs in the background. I'm at my place, I said. You know, where I live. I'm doing chores. No time for bullshit. As always. Oh, no time for my bullshit. Finn sounded somewhat breathless, and I could tell he was walking. The sound of construction got a little further away as he moved about his property. No, I said, turning down the radio. No, I haven't. What's going on? Finn continued with the kind of tired, weary tone of voice I would expect. I heard the crunch of leaves stop as he found a place to stand. I didn't respond right away, unsure of which part I was more upset about. The fact that everyone was being lied to again, or that all 12 people were gone. All of them. It was one night, and that nightmare lasted less than an hour, and all of those people were taken without a chance. But I stammered. Even the kid, the one who was floating over the... Finn interrupted, but his voice was soft. I didn't ask how they knew. I didn't ask what Finn or the other rangers saw that convinced them, but I knew better than to question it. Finn never said anything unless he meant it. Finn said. I stopped folding my clothes entirely, dropping a pair of jeans on the floor in frustration. They have to understand it wasn't his fault, right? He didn't do this. He's a victim just like everyone else. Finn sighed. I felt slightly sick to my stomach. Oh, come on, you don't tell me you blame him too. Finn clarified. There was a long pause. I didn't know what to say, and I could almost hear Finn's brain searching for his next words. With a sharp breath, I scoffed and shook my head. You sound like my dad right now. With a sharp breath, I scoffed and shook my head. You sound like my dad now, I told him. He was... We sat in silence. My fingers traced the buttons of an old flannel shirt, one that had faded to a completely new set of colors after years of use. I wondered if my dad ever went through something like this. I wondered if the guilt aided him, too. I'm really worried about him, I finally said. Danny, I'm trying to talk him into seeing a doctor or something, at least to work on his sleepwalking. I just think... As my voice trailed off, Finn finished the thought for me. It was a statement, not a question. I didn't like the word soft in this context, thinking it sounded insulting, but it was hard to find a better description. Yeah, I know, I sighed as I resumed my chores, stuffing socks together in matching pairs with my phone pinched against my shoulder. Still, Danny is gonna know about the vigil. There's no way he wasn't made aware of it, and if he doesn't already know, he'll probably see it in the news. Finn said, taking a heavy breath. I could imagine the cloud it would make in the cold air. The way Danny blamed himself, the way he held on to that tragedy like his own personal cross to bear, convinced me that seeing the faces of the ones we lost would just make him spiral all over again. Right now, they weren't real to him. They didn't have names, they didn't have faces, and they didn't have families. If he knew their stories, it would shatter that little protection he still had. I'll take over for him after the vigil, I said, my mind made up. I'll handle the news story on the event. I'll make sure he doesn't touch it. He'll know about it, sure, but at least he won't be there in person to see it all go down. Finn said. I could hear his lighter click before he took a deep, shaky breath. Yeah? After we got off the phone, I turned the radio back up. Daniel must have finally taken one of my requests because Fire and Rain by James Taylor was just starting. Hearing it on my dad's old radio brought back a vivid, long-buried memory of listening to him sing along from the garage on a Saturday morning, at that time when dads are always up to some weird new project. I sent Dan a quick thank you over text. He responded a few minutes later. I didn't even argue. We didn't really go to church when I was a kid. It just wasn't a thing we did, but that night, as I put on my coat and laced my boots to join the crowds of people gathered on Cypress Street, I felt like I was witnessing something sacred for the first time. There was no traffic, and the roads were covered in wet, slushy snow that hadn't been salted yet. Trudging through it was a slow process, but I wasn't the only one. Minutes before 9 o'clock, I watched families leave their homes and fight against the cold wind, all walking in the same direction in a way that reminded me too much of the pale figures that wandered into the woods at night. These ghosts were alive, but no less eerie. The bell rang out 9 times above the church, the same way I remembered it on the night I moved into my apartment. I imagined it should have been comforting or melodic, but it was far too loud, too shrill. It made my teeth hurt. I began to pick voices out from the crowds. I still can't believe Linda's gone. They found her car, didn't they? The windows were completely smashed. She shouldn't have been out so late, with the curfew. That's right, the curfew. Despite this frantic cling to normalcy, I knew everyone felt just how wrong this was. Calling what happened a storm or a blizzard was a weak bandage. Words that softened the blow of the truth we all knew deep down. No one was talking about the monsters or the brutality, but we all shared the same shifting eyes that followed the tree line, startled and wary at every little noise. I saw the candles placed on the front steps of the church, the snow brushed away to make room for photos and flowers. Poinsettias and pots were placed in a circle, their leaves already damp and glistening in the cold air, as small flakes began to fall. Before I even got to the center, I could hear a woman crying. A man was shushing her gently, rubbing her back in front of a photograph of a young boy. My throat was tight with nerves. I recognized the face in the photograph from a short trip to the grocery store. He was going to put food out for his missing dog that night. Finn's voice cut through the strangled sobs. He approached me from behind, standing next to me with one hand in his coat pocket. As he got closer to the vigil, he pulled down his cowboy hat in respect. While the townsfolk gathered and walked in slow circles around the display, Finn and I stood back and gave them space. How's the farmhouse repair going? I asked. He grunted in response. I watched his hand go to his front pocket for a cigarette before he changed his mind. Oh, don't tell me you're getting lumber from the forest, I said with a grimace. He shook his head. Oh, gross. We shared a long... Oh, oops. Ugh, gross. We shared a look, long and eerie. My mind was conjuring the image in my head of snake-like tree roots spreading out beneath all of Pine Haven, moving and inching closer to the center, like veins spreading out from a heart. My gaze was stuck on the distant tree line. The snow moved in a cyclone as the wind picked up, serenaded by whispered conversations, sobs and sniffles. More and more people gathered around us, their heads bowed, many of them just as tense and anxious as I was. This moment felt lonely. Finn and I were part of the crowd, sure, but we were separate from the rest. Observers keeping watch. We looked. We didn't touch. It's going to spread, isn't it? I asked. I didn't look at Finn when I spoke, but I could feel him shift next to me from one foot to the other. He said with a deep sigh. Finn finally succumbed to the temptation to light a cigarette, turning away while his lighter clicked. Standing beneath a flickering street lamp, I looked around at the weary and miserable faces of Pine Haven. We were living in a snapshot of our own destruction. Photos of dead children in front of us, husbands and wives mourning their lost loves, fog swirling around the distant mountains, and one blinking red light about a mile away coming from that old wooden tower. I knew my best friend was up there, keeping his own vigil, watching over a graveyard of thousands, while we stared into the fresh faces of the newest dozen. Oh, damn, it'd be like that. All right, that was chapter 6. Man, that'd be a wild fucking game. Fair enough. I can make this a little smaller, I think. Oops. There you go. Yeah, it's a requirement, I know, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, chapter 6. Now we are on to chapter 7. So chapter 7 is predominantly Danny Boys, so it is going to be a dialogue-only chapter, so we're just going to get right into it. Should be pretty quick. It's nothing. Seasonal allergies? Yes. What did the doctor say about your sleepwalking? Reduce workplace stress. Oh, good fucking luck. So basically, the doc didn't help at all. Unless you think listening to Enya and holding hands in a circle is going to make all this go away. I'll pick you up a CD of Celtic harps. Sorry, I'm in a bitchy mood today. Not your fault. I just feel like shit. No, I'm fine. I'll be fine. Good afternoon, Pine Haven. This is Evelyn McKinnon, and I'm joined by Daniel Esperanza on a particularly wet and chilly December morning. How you doing, Danny? As for traffic, it looks like the road to Beckley is clear and salted, but expect ice in the morning. Get your commute going a few minutes early if you can, and stay safe out there. Until then, here's Jim Croce with a personal favorite, Time in a Bottle. Finn is taking over soon. He swung by this morning before he had to head on again to do something in the woods. Ranger duties. What does that even mean, by the way? Think he's out there guarding the perimeter, keeping the government drones away? Well, there's been a lot of bugs around today. They keep trying to find a way in. I think they're just cold and desperate. If you were in pain and stuck in a place where you didn't belong, wouldn't you try to fight your way out too? Forest duty. I think the Rangers are still out there. The Rangers were, in fact, still out there. Okay, that is chapter 7. All right. On to chapter 8. Oh, man. Everything's fine. We're going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. This chapter's messy, but it's fine. Everything's fine. Nobody panic. It's fine. Everything's fine. Messy, messy chapter, but that's okay. Okay, let's see. Bringing it to, yeah. Testing 1. Testing. All right. Chapter 8. Ginger Snap. Evelyn. There was a day that changed everything we thought we knew about the forest, about what went on beneath it. We thought we understood. Things went into the fog, things died, then they came back as something new, something wrong. Oh, God, I wish it was that simple. The wind was pushing smoke up the mountainside, creating billowing black clouds that faded into the trees. That fire we had seen in the early afternoon was still going, spreading slowly up the mountain. Daniel and I stood on the fire escape for the longest time and just watched it burn. We were equal parts nervous and mesmerized by it. Daniel pondered as he leaned against the railing. He had his arms tightly crossed to keep away the chill that was creeping up to his shoulders. My heart began to sink. They used to do those when I was a kid, I said. My dad told me about it, but they stopped after something went wrong. I shrugged, turning around and back towards the building. I felt Daniel's eyes on me as I went. I don't know. All I know is that I'm fucking freezing. I'm going back inside. I'll leave the door propped open for you. I drew my flannel tighter around myself. For just a moment, I didn't want to think about the fires. I didn't want to think about the orange and yellow uniform my dad used to wear, or the smell of smoke. I didn't want to think about the volunteers coming out of the forest, giving me that solemn, quiet stare while I was sitting under the old oak tree next to a busted tire swing. We're sorry, Mrs. McKinnon. We couldn't save him. When I slipped back into the broadcast room, Daniel stayed on the fire escape, just watching. I could tell he was cold by the way he tucked his hands into his sleeves, the color of his face flushed as frost nipped at his skin. His eyes were fixed on the tree line. Not on the smoke, but the tree line. I sat back down at my side of the desk. I was busy myself by adjusting. Oh, oops. I sat back down at my side of the desk. I was busying myself by adjusting the various media cells on my screen, preparing a pre-recorded advertisement for a local antique store's holiday sale. There were less and less ads lately, less people sticking around, businesses shutting their doors for good. Pine Haven was shrinking. The worst part is I expected it to happen a long time ago. I kept looking back at Daniel, though, and his far-off expression. "What's wrong, Danny boy?" Daniel didn't acknowledge me at first. He just stared at that spot between the pines, his breath appearing as a small fog before being carried off by the wind. He asked. The question lingered in the air for a moment. Yeah, all the time, I said with a light chuckle. That stupid bird out there again? You know, if he's bothering you, I've found that if you just toss part of a candy bar at him, he'll dive right for it. And Dan answered quickly. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. For a second there, he didn't even look like himself. I knew that Daniel had been having a tougher time than usual. Who wouldn't? What he went through on the night of the invasion was more than anyone should ever have to deal with. But still, our Danny always had a way of finding optimism and hope. He was the goofiest, most tender-hearted person we knew, even when the going got especially rough. As I watched him fight a losing battle in his mind, I wondered if that endless positivity was genuine or not. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was more for us than for himself. "You want to talk about it, my dude?" I asked, gently pulling out his chair and patting the seat to try enticing him over. He looked at me, then at the tree line for a short while, then finally decided to enter the building and close the door behind him. Instantly, the room felt warmer. He answered as he sat down, kneeling forward with elbows on his knees. I snorted, hanging up my headset and giving a quick glance at the lineup on the screen. We had time to spare. "Bud, a while back, you watched me run into the woods, unprepared, willing to fight a goddamn tree. Losing our minds is what we do best here. You're in good company." I noticed that my teasing didn't exactly convince him, so my expression turned a little softer and more genuine. "I just want to help you." Daniel cracked a small smile. It wasn't a happy one, I don't think, just a slightly satisfied one. Of all the people he should expect judgment from, I wasn't that person. He knew that. He cleared his throat, looking down at the floor. Then he looked at his hands while he picked at one of his fingernails, flinching when he agitated a sore spot near the quick. He had been biting them. He finally said. He took a sharp breath. I was silent for far too long after he said all that. It was unexpected. It wasn't like him. What he said alarmed me on several levels, but only because the forest had never done that before, but... Oh, whoops. Hold up, gotta go back up. What he said alarmed me. What he said alarmed me on several levels. Not only because the forest had never done that before, but because I never realized Daniel still struggled with that night. My eye, the time we spent in the hospital, I never asked and we never talked about it. Maybe I'm not the greatest friend after all. You still think about it, I said quietly. Daniel didn't look me in the eye. He just took a shaky breath, rubbing his nose. He whispered. It wasn't true. I knew that. Finn knew that. And deep down, the people of Pine Haven knew it too. But that shame in Daniel's eyes told me that this self-loathing had been building and building for months. A year? God, I had been so caught up in my own bullshit that I never even knew it. Okay, listen up. I sat up straight, giving Daniel a stern look. That night, when that chode out there took my eye, it wasn't your fault. Danny, you were in the hospital unconscious for 2 days after that. 2 whole days. He tried to argue. I interrupted him. It broke your ribs. It almost fractured your spine. It kicked you in the head so hard that we thought you might not wake up. Like, ever. I reached for one of his hands, gripping it tightly. He was shaking. Danny, I knew that you would have done something to help me if you could have. I knew that from day one. I watched Daniel look towards the wall, the floor, anywhere but at me. He said, It does matter, I said, rolling my chair over to get back into his line of sight. Everyone else who came here before us is gone now, Danny. But you and me, Finn, we're still here. And that's got to mean something, right? The other operators didn't make it, but we did. Daniel scoffed. I went quiet after he said that, giving him time to let it linger on his tongue and in the air. You know, I always had the impression that Daniel was too good for this place. He had talent and charisma. He was creative. He was clever. He was a genuinely good person. You know, if you want to quit, that's okay too, I told him. No one will be angry at you. We can still keep in touch, you know? You can call me anytime. I'll visit whenever I can. I'll send you pictures of that fucking bird. Maybe you can find a place back in the city closer to your family. You don't have to do this anymore. Daniel looked at me in silence for a long time. The room grew eerily still. The clocks had stopped at some point, as they often did. Even the wind outside the wooden walls decided to calm. Then, with a heavy sigh, Daniel folded his other hand over mine and gave it a tight squeeze. He said, But you have dreams, ambitions, I argued. Daniel chuckled weakly. I smiled and gripped his hand, giving it a strong squeeze. I don't want to find out, Danny boy, I told him. So if that shithead comes back and tries to mess with you again, just remember it doesn't mean anything. It's just trying to get under your skin like the dick face that it is. Dan laughed. No, I giggled. But you're a dick. Oh, whoops. No, I giggled. But you're a dick for. Daniel stopped himself when he noticed the pure evil expression on my face. I let out a cackle and he slapped me on the knee hard enough to make me jump back. Oh, fuck you. Oh, whoops me. Whoops. That was Danny. Oops. I got too excited to say fuck you. It's fine. I let out a cackle and he slapped me on the knee hard enough to make me jump back. Oh! I got him laughing, genuinely, and at long last. Nothing would make it all better, I knew that, but this dark cloud hanging over us was too heavy to hold all the time. I knew how it felt to drown, and I knew how it felt to need someone to pull you back up when you went under. Dan took a deep breath. He said, now holding both of my hands in both of his. He was still cold from the frozen December air, soaking up the heat of my fingers. I studied his face seriously. Will you pinky swear it? I asked. Daniel chuckled and bound our little fingers together, squeezing them tightly. He agreed. Here we were, 2 grown adults making a sacred vow fit for children. I guess it's true that sometimes when we're afraid, all you can really do is go back to the last place that felt safe. And right now, that safe place was Danny boy. But it couldn't last. I was the first to notice the subtle shake in the floor. The wood around us began to creak and our desks trembled, the items atop it shifting across the surface. By the time Daniel realized this, he was holding onto the edge of the table with a white-knuckle grip until those tremors finally stopped, all while I protected my microphone from jostling loose. Dust fell from the ceiling above us, and I noticed a new, small crack in the main lookout window. Dear God, I could only hope this rickety old building was made to last. Daniel spoke softly, finally letting go of my hand to go stand beside the window. He was looking out into the forest, where the fire had now subsided and the smoke was a little thinner. The way the wood beneath our feet groaned, the way the metal of the fire escape twisted and bent. I didn't know how I felt. Maybe, I shrugged. But maybe we should also start thinking of an escape plan? Just in case. Daniel sighed. The day passed by, slowly and with little incident aside from a few tame oddities. The sink in the back of the room was clogged, and I found the beginnings of a wasp's nest while attempting to repair it. All of the wasps inside were dead and roughly the size of my thumb. Daniel almost threw up when I pretended to eat one. A while later, the same song played on the radio over and over for 2 full hours. Lonely Teardrops by Jackie Wilson. Daniel already knew all the words to it and was singing along more enthusiastically each time. Eventually, we got so stir-crazy, he talked me into getting up and dancing. I'm not usually a dancer. I've got 2 left feet when I'm not hungover, but halfway through learning how to do the Lindy Hop, I think I started to have a little fun. That was how things always seemed to work. It was a tug-of-war between comfort and fear. The floor would shake and dust would fall from above our heads. We'd sing along to a favorite song. The phones would ring and ghostly voices would answer. 5 minutes later, Danny was teaching me how to say naughty words in American Sign Language. But as the day began to grow dark, Daniel and I realized something odd. We hadn't heard from Finn at all. At 7 o'clock, right at the time when Finn would have been coming by to take over for one of us, we got a call. It wasn't him, and it wasn't the sheriff either. It was the voice of an old woman. "Evelyn, dear," she spoke calmly on the other end of the phone. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" I looked at Dan, perplexed, trying desperately to place the voice. We were on the air, and I had no choice but to make up an excuse, chuckling anxiously and pulling something out of my ass on the spot. I'm certain it has, ma'am. Now, could you jog my memory and let our listeners know who I'm speaking to?" There was a sigh on the other end, disappointed, resolute. "Rose, darling. My name is Rose." It started to come back to me the moment that name left her lips. It was Danny's first day on the job, just before he lost his hearing, just before the forest took its first blood sacrifice. Rose was on the phone with us. She was talking about God. We blocked that number and thought we'd never hear from her again. "I remember," I said, trying not to sound shaken. "Of course. How are you doing tonight, Rose? What's on your mind?" There was a pause, heavy and foreboding, and when the old woman spoke again, she spoke so quietly, and yet with such command. I found myself leaning in closer to listen, holding my headset against one ear. "The ground is bursting open, isn't it?" she said. "We've all felt it, my dear, the great bellow from the deep. I told you it would happen so long ago, and here we are at long last, on the eve of a new world." The wind began to pick up beyond the window, whistling through cracks in the walls and sending a chill into the room that burrowed beneath my clothes and made my hair stand on end. "That kingdom in the forest is finally preparing for the arrival of God," Rose continued. "You know it to be true. Your friend knows it even better, doesn't he? He's seen it. It gave him deaf ears to better see its glory. It's already calling to him. visiting him in his sleep. I stared at the console. Her phone number wasn't appearing on the screen. In fact, there was no number. As I felt my blood pressure skyrocket, my first instinct was to reach over and mute our voices, leaving this conversation between the three of us and this tower alone. I didn't want to even imagine how her words might affect the people listening. Next to me, Daniel let out a shaky breath, and I saw the fog forming in front of his mouth. I don't know where you heard all that, I murmured. But if you... You're drinking again, sweet girl. Rose spoke in that sweet, poison-tipped voice. And after everyone was so proud of you. Something was wrong. I looked over my shoulder, and all the windows and all the doorways, expecting to see someone or something there. It hit me then. Whatever was on the phone with us wasn't what we expected. I don't think it had ever really been an old woman. Rose, I said in a trembling voice. Who are you? Really? Rose laughed. It was a quiet, withdrawn laugh hidden behind closed lips. That pleasant, fragile tone of hers no longer instilled false comfort in me, but rather it seemed more menacing than ever before. I've known you for your whole life, little one, she said. I could hear the smile on her face. I've been here all along. Oh, and my goodness, sweet baby girl. How you've grown. But then the voice changed. It deepened, taking on a different accent, a different tone. I heard the voice of a man, gruff and gentle at the same time, with a slow Virginia accent that used to lull me to sleep. Don't you worry now, Ginger Snap, the voice said. It'll all make sense to you in time. Hanging up wasn't enough. I tossed my headset, getting it away from me as quickly as I could. When I stood up, my chair toppled over and I stumbled over it, trying to walk backwards until I hit the wall. My breath was stolen from me, my heart was racing, and a chill passed through each and every cell in my body. Daniel was looking at me with concern and heartbreak, but he didn't say anything. He didn't have to ask. I think he knew. I sank to the floor until I was curled into a ball. I couldn't describe how badly it hurt to hear that voice again, to wonder if it was real. The floodgates burst in an instant, and my face was wet with tears. Both hands clapped over my mouth. I wanted to scream. I wanted to be sick. The light above our desks had gone out, leaving us in the dim glow of our computer screens. Daniel didn't say a word, but he sat down next to me on the floor, leaning against the wall to keep me company while I cried. He didn't try to touch me, and I appreciated that. Soon, however, we both found ourselves staring at the same view. The sky had long been dark, the early winter sunset leaving us with a cloudy and moonless sky. But somewhere out above the pines we saw a brand new light. It was a sudden shock of red that rose into the air, exploding in a shower of flame. Daniel stood quickly and followed the sparks without blinking, the shimmering light reflecting in his eyes. Wiping my face, I stood up and joined him at the window, watching the ball of light glimmer above the tallest trees. I realized something then, something I should have known long ago. The Rangers entered the forest that morning, but we never saw them come back out. Finn was supposed to be here by now, I said shakily. He's late. How many times has Finn ever been late? Daniel's face went blank. He was already on his way across the room. He found the cabinet of emergency supplies, already strapping a first aid kit to his belt, while I was dialing the police station. And for the first time ever, no one picked up. The line's busy, I said breathlessly. All the lines are busy. What the hell? Daniel said. He sounded just as panicked as I was. I tried calling again. No answer. The last thing I wanted to do was go out there, braving the woods once again and risking life and limb. We had already done it more than once before. It never ended well for us, did it? But I remembered the night I lost my eye and who had carried me back to town. We weren't even friends yet, but Finn still saved us both that night. Never even asking for so much as a thank you. And then that prick had the audacity to stick around, to be my friend, to become my family. Give me the shotgun. I pointed at the cabinet, snapping my fingers. Daniel squinted at me and kept shoving shit in a backpack. Come on, hop to it. Give me the shotgun. I marched over to the cabinet and grabbed the weapon myself. Fine, I'll get it myself. I scowled at him and he just smirked and shook his head. Oh, don't you start laughing at me now. Daniel commented, closing the cabinet and strapping the backpack to himself one shoulder at a time. I was shaking as I filled my pockets with shotgun ammo. What? Daniel continued. I snorted. Yeah, I get it, and I'm still the same little shit I was back then. Daniel shook his head. He looked me in the eye, wearing a confident yet tender smile. He poked me on the tip of my nose before closing the cupboard door, adjusting the bag over his shoulders. I was left in stunned silence by the window while he grabbed our coats. You know, before Daniel and Finn, I always thought that Jennifer would be the only true... I always thought... Before Daniel and Finn, I always thought that Jennifer would be the one truly special person in my life, my soulmate. She was the love that I lost. I desperately clung to that idea for a long time, even after she chose Elijah instead of me. Even after she died. Maybe it's time for me to let her go. Maybe she's finally ready to rest. Daniel and I put on our coats, strapped on packs and ammunition, and rushed down the metal staircase just as we did all those years ago. Last time it was a fool's errand, a mistake. This time, the life of a friend was on the line. It was still a stupid idea, sure, but I don't think we would be able to forgive ourselves if we didn't try. After all, he would do the same for us. The flare was still in the sky, straight ahead and half a mile up the mountain. As we approached the tree line, I noticed Daniel stop, his eyes fixed forward at something unseen between the pines. I followed his gaze and saw nothing but the gentle fall of snow. Still, I didn't need to see it to know what it was. Hey, man. I grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. Don't look at it. Don't think about it. It can't hurt you if you don't let it. Was that true? I didn't know. I was making a wild guess, but I suppose, at the time, it must have worked. Moments later, Daniel had torn his eyes away from the tree line and was the first to step into the forest, without looking back even once. He pulled me along by the hand as the light of the radio tower disappeared behind the bare, frozen trees. I don't know how long we walked. I felt safer with someone else at my side, but that uneasy feeling of being watched never left. Every hoot of an owl in the trees, every rustle of branches, every squeak of a small animal felt like the spies of the forest were watching our every move. Even when nothing was there, we felt hunted. And we were. That feeling only grew stronger when we found huge cavern... Oops. That feeling only grew stronger when we found huge cave-ins scattered along the path. At a certain point, the damage from the earthquakes could be seen. Trees were sinking into the soil. Deep cracks were forming between the trees. Some of them were leaning to one side. The further we went, the deeper that damage became. Eventually, we found large caverns that led straight into tunnels, stretching in all directions. Daniel said quietly, crouching down at the edge of a steep fall. Down below, we could see the gnarled system of roots reaching deep down into a dark cave that could have gone on for miles. A horrible, rotten stench was coming up from the tunnel. I remembered the last time we had fallen into the mines, letting ourselves drop to avoid certain death. Even then, it wasn't as deep or dark as it looked now. I don't like it, I told Dan, tugging on the back of his coat to get him away from the edge. Let's find another way around. I don't want you falling in there. Daniel stood up carefully, watching his step. We only got a few paces away when the ground began to tremble beneath us, subtly at first. Shit, I hissed under my breath. We both stumbled back, Daniel pulling on my arm as we made a quick escape from the crumbling ground. The quake took more of the forest down into the cavern with a loud rumble. A tall, old pine began to creak and snap at the base of its trunk as it fell, crashing into the pit on a bed. Crashing into the pit on a bed of frozen dirt and snow. Its roots were sticking up in all directions, dripping slime at the ends, as if it were bleeding. We didn't fall in this time, but it was a close call, and it was very, very loud. Something probably heard that, I said, not even bothering to brush the dirt and dust off myself as I began marching forward. We made a huge circle around the damage so as to not tempt a second cheeky little mudslide. We have to find Finn quickly and get the hell out of here. I'm tired of playing these stupid games with... I went quiet. We both stopped walking, standing perfectly still, just listening. Daniel looked at me perplexed. He didn't hear anything, but I did. Something was moving underneath us. Something big and quick. I could feel the vibration in the ground as it dug its way through the tunnels, coming to investigate the sound. I turned to Dan and put a finger to my lips, walking slower and with more care than before. My heart was racing. It was hard to breathe. Below us, something released a muffled but bone-chilling roar, causing us both to stop dead in our tracks. Daniel signed with his hands, slowly and precisely. Making sure the dog's not barking. Hold on. Okay. We waited, hardly moving a muscle. The quakes in the ground traveled from one side to the other, as if the beast below was patrolling back and forth over and over. Finally, those vibrations in the ground began to move away. It lost our trail and was traveling back into the depths of the mountainside. It's gone, I signed back with my hands. At least, for now. We walked for another hour, at least, feeling the air grow tighter as we crept further up the ragged slopes. The signal came from somewhere nearby. Now it was just a matter of hoping and praying that whoever held that flare gun was still alive and waiting for help. The pines grew taller and older the further we went. I had never seen trees this big before. They eclipsed the moonlight above us, blocking out the sky and the stars until we were left in a cold, black void. The smell was the first thing that led us on the right path. When we broke into a large clearing, we found a pile of dead trees, bones, and burnt flesh stacked up in the snow. Jesus, the stench was overwhelming, so bad that even from several feet away, we were both pulling our coats over our mouths and noses to keep from being sick. It was the same horrible smell I remembered from the tunnels, only 100 times worse. Dan said, taking a sharp breath. He regretted it immediately after, as he turned away with his hand over his mouth. As Daniel hunched near the bushes, trying to keep his last meal down, I dared to creep slightly closer to the burn pile. It was a disgusting collection of remains, charred bones of animals and people. Some of them fused together as if they had melted into one body. Some still had flesh attached, faces stuck in eternal screams. Others were moving. They were trying to pull themselves out of the pile, but they were too weak to do anything but twitch and flex their damaged, withered muscles. One of them, decidedly human in appearance, made eye contact with me, and my blood ran cold. I was so distracted by the burn pile that I didn't notice what else circled the clearing. Something had left a trophy behind. The creak of tree branches made me jump. My eye caught the top of a boot first, slowly swaying in the wind. I followed it up and saw a ring of fresh, blood-soaked bodies hanging from the trees above our heads, dripping into the snow. I choked back a scream and stepped away just as Daniel finally found the strength to look. We were both staring up at them, at least a dozen corpses that had been ripped to pieces, their remaining parts suspended by vines and swaying gently in the breeze. They were hanging around us in a circle like some sick art project or fresh game left out to drain. They were all wearing the same green uniform. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. That's a technical term, in case you didn't know. Thanks, I appreciate that. Hi, Quincy. I'm sorry. I don't reply until after I'm done, so I appreciate you. Also, hello, amazing. If you guys haven't checked out Quincy's Tavern, you definitely should. Amazing recipes, amazing D&D, amazing person. This is the second book for A Lonely Broadcast. If you haven't checked out the first, I absolutely recommend it. We are in active change of updating the first audiobook. There were some technical audio issues with some of Spike's audio. So we're going to work on actively updating that. And then book 2, audiobook for book 2 should be, handled soon. All right, let's see. Also, I appreciate that. Oh, yeah, Cryptech, it says in the bottom right-hand side what the clicker are for. That's okay, though. All right, so that was chapter 8. Let's see where we're at. We should be, I think... Yeah, okay, chapter 9. Oh, God, this is the chapter with the Hydra. Okay, I remember this. Oh, man, you guys thought the human centipede was bad. Prepare your buttholes. This thing has nothing on that. It's gross. It's gross. All right, let's see. And to keep chat controlled, fair enough. That's fair. Okay. Chapter 9. The Hydra. Evelyn. The freezing air around us was thick with the scent of death. Surrounded by a ring of hanging bodies, I could hear the whistle of wind and the creak of tree branches as they struggled to hold the weight of the swaying corpses. Their faces, some... Let me approach that again. Hold on. I didn't like that. Their faces, some fixed in a permanent scream of terror, shined in the glow of my flashlight with a milk-white stare. Daniel whimpered quietly. In the moonlight, I could see his dark eyes welling up with tears. We were too late. My chest was tight, filled with a mixture of despair and pure rage. Even after our best attempts, we didn't do enough. The blood was still fresh, dripping into the snow. If we had just been a little bit quicker, if we had spent less time on the phone with that crazy old bat, maybe we could have done something. I grabbed my backpack, holding it tightly in both hands, and threw it down into the snow with a frustrated yell. Furious, I stomped back and forth with tears running down my face until I couldn't hold the anger in anymore. I picked the pack at my feet again. I kicked the pack at my feet again and again, picking it up just to throw it back down and stomp on it. Daniel tried his best to calm me down, attempting to put his arms around me, but I only pushed him away. I didn't want a hug. I didn't want him to hold me. I wanted to fucking shoot something. As I tried to silence the urge to scream, Daniel brought up something even more sickening. Even more sad. He asked. He sniffled, wiping his cold, red nose on his sleeve. I paused, letting out a shaking breath and watching it form a cloud of fog in the cold air. He was right. Of all the people lost to this godforsaken chunk of land, Finn didn't deserve to be stuck here forever like Jenny. Like Dad. He doesn't have a family. I corrected him, realizing almost immediately how wrong I was. We would be the ones to bury him. No doubt. I'll look on this side. Wiping my face, I marched around the clearing, shining my light up at the stinking corpses that surrounded us. Some were impossible to recognize, their faces mangled or heads completely removed. Others still wore expressions of terror, frozen in time. But none of them, neither in face or in body, reminded me of him. Daniel must have noticed the same thing. He said shakily, stepping around the burn pile. Maybe, I whispered, too quiet for Dan to hear. Maybe not. The ground was loose at the edge of the tree line. I could see the bend and the pines as they began to sink into the ground, dipping into another one of those holes that led to the tunnel systems beneath the forest floor. I shined my light downward, following the debris from a recent cave-in. Finn? I asked. The scent of burned flesh reached my nose, and I became aware of a sound, like a sick wheeze. Someone was breathing. Then I spotted it, a pair of dirty, black boots. They were connected to a body sitting slumped against the roots and half hidden by the shadow of the cave's entrance. The body was shivering, breathing, alive. A very quiet voice was calling my name, struggling to speak louder than a whisper. Finn! I called out, beginning to climb down the fallen logs and roots that formed a slope into the tunnel. I caught a bit of wet mud, my foot slipping. Oh, shit. Finn, it's us. We're here. We saw your signal. Dan, he's here. I heard a cough from down below and a shaky, wheezing breath. As I approached, crawling over roots, I shined my light on Finn's face. Good God. He was burned. One half of his jaw, neck, and one shoulder melted all the way down to the elbow. The skin was bloody and twisted, steam still rising from his wounds and emitting a metallic scent. He was recognizable. He still had both eyes, a nose, most of his lips, but I could hardly imagine how much it hurt. He looked up at me, blinking wearily and forcing a tiny smirk on the one unaffected side of his face. He forced the words out, slowly extending his uninjured arm so that I could help him stand. It took a couple of tries, but finally he got to his feet, shivering and curling his half-burned arm up against his chest. Every move he made was tender and careful. Jesus fucking Christ, I whispered. What happened to you? He said, just as quietly, holding back. He said just as quietly, holding back a cough. I went ahead of him, stepping onto the dirt piles and roots so that I could help drag him up with me. Daniel was already reaching into his pack to grab a length of rope, tossing it down so that I could tie it around Finn's waist and keep him steady. Between the two of us, we managed to get him up to the surface where he staggered and pressed his back into the trunk of a tree. Daniel told him softly, searching the pack for bandages. It wouldn't do much, but we could at least cover the worst of the burns. Dan's hands were shaking the whole time. He wasn't a big fan of the sight of blood. I handed Finn a bottle of water, then opened it for him after he struggled to get the cap off. He took a small sip, hissing in pain and putting his hand up to his neck to touch the raw, burned muscle. He looked over at this stinking mass of dead, charred flesh while Dan got busy wrapping up his arm. My heart sank. My stomach was doing flips as I recalled what I heard below us, those heavy motions in the earth as we circled the cave-in. Whatever killed the Rangers was right under us that whole time. Daniel and I never knew. If we hadn't stopped and kept still, we would probably have been hanging from the trees too. What did it do? I asked. As Finn's gaze met mine, his brave face started to drain away. His breath quivered and he winced, muscles tensing on the side of his neck as his teeth clenched. He finally said, trembling like a leaf in the wind. We all went silent, the three of us. Then Daniel asked a question that was on both of our minds. Only I was too scared to ask. Finn's eyes were wide and fearful, reflecting the moon's light. He was staring off into the middle distance the whole time. Then he swallowed, speaking up in a hoarse whisper. A chill ran up my spine, separate from the cold. A chill ran up my spine, separate from the winter cold. I put a hand on Finn's good arm and pulled him away from the tree, gently coaxing him to follow. Let's hope we don't see it then, I said. Come on, we have to get out of here. Something is going to smell all this blood. Finn, can you walk? Our friend was staggering clumsily along, but he nodded his head once he got his feet under him and began to march beside me. We followed the direction of Finn's compass, taking a route different from the one that had brought us here. If there was anything we had learned during our time in the forest, it was not to tempt anything that may have already been tracking our steps. But as the night grew darker and the trees grew thicker, we noticed something that wasn't there before. A light. Ahead of us, rising from the ground in a giant, pulsating glow, was that magenta-colored light we had all seen from a distance. Only now we were close enough to hear the ear-stinging hum that it made. It was like a low drone or the sound of an undersea giant, deep but steady. We were all silent as we walked towards it, feeling some magnetism that I still can't quite explain. Finn asked, putting his hand to a tree to steady himself while he rested his feet. I don't know, I said. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. Maybe we shouldn't get too close. And yet, my words betrayed our actions. Despite the concerns, despite the questions, we continued to make our way directly toward the light, walking in a single file line the whole way. Daniel was in the front, speechless and calm, almost as if that glow had been our goal since the beginning. It didn't take long before we figured out where that light was coming from. Trees began to thin. Soil began to crack. What first looked like a long ditch from a distance was actually something far more massive, far more unexplainable. Right ahead of us was an enormous split in the earth, forming a deep, wide chasm. The glow was coming from its depths, so far down into the abyss that we couldn't see where it ended. It was like a crater straight to hell. An old memory came back to me then. Over a year ago, Daniel and I had a conversation on the phone with a familiar voice. I still remembered the exact words she used and the way she said it. I had a dream in which the forest split in two. I whispered Rose's warning out into the cold night air. Daniel and I exchanged glances, something far more than fear between us. It was dread. Real and tangible. And this was something utterly and completely unknown. We both remembered the rest of the old woman's dream. Daniel repeated, A fearsome bellow that shook the whole earth. I finished, voice soft. The eerie silence that followed was suffocating. No birds, no wind, no howling of wolves. It was just us and that hum from the center of the earth. Hey, Danny boy. Do you think God lives in the forest? The three of us stood there in silence, looking at one another and then into the enormous pit that was swallowing the woods. All of these quakes, all of these storms. It was getting bigger every day. Something was down there. I knew it. I could feel it. I didn't know if it was a living thing or just some force of nature, but it was emerging one ray of light at a time. And this forest was its home, its kingdom. Something was coming. I didn't know what we would do when it arrived. Finn and I managed to break our attention away from the glow, but Daniel did not. He was staring unblinkingly into the endlessness, the color casting a pink. The color casting a pink hue on his face and the whites of his eyes. When he started to lean, my heart skipped a beat. Dan was tipping forward, about ready to let himself fall in when Finn and I both rushed to push him back and into the snow. He fell, stiff as a board, eyes still glazed over with an ice-cold expression. I pinned him down with my full weight and snapped my fingers in his face. Dan! Dan! I hissed, tapping him on the cheek until he finally blinked and took a sharp inhale of breath. Dan, come on, wake up! He looked up at me, confused and lost. His eyes darted around the forest as if those memories were flooding back to him, reminding him of where he was and how he got here. It took a moment before his breathing settled and he began to touch his own face, making sure he was inside his body again. You almost fell, I snapped, still holding him down with my knees, hands pressed sternly against both shoulders. To him, I probably looked pissed. It was all fear. Finally, he let out a shaky breath that formed a thick, cold fog. He said, Now that was an idea I could get behind. I let him up, slowly helping him to his feet and brushing the snow off his shoulders. Finn and I looked at one another, making the silent agreement that linking our arms would be the best possible way to stick together. Daniel was in the middle. I gave him a rough yank anytime he started to hesitate and look back. We walked, and we walked, and we walked. Our pace was slow, keeping up with Finn's exhausted and injured body. At first, we were lucky. Don't like that. Don't like that. Mm. At first, we were lucky. Oh, the audio didn't even catch that. That's... gonna ignore that. Gonna pretend I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear any of that. It's fine. It's fine. At first, we were lucky. We didn't see much in our path other than a few small, timid creatures and more evidence of the collapsing ground. Our luck had to run out eventually, when the moon was high above us and the forest grew eerily silent. We felt that rumble in the earth again. This time it wasn't a quake. It didn't shake the trees, it didn't split the ground. It was just movement, tunneling beneath us in a straight line through the frozen soil. Finn's bloodied face became paler, wet with fever as his eyes turned startlingly wide. He knew that feeling. We all did. Something was moving under our feet. Something had been following us. Finn said, voice shaking. He pushed Danny to the back to keep us both going. My hands were gripping the shotgun tightly as I marched forward, my jaw clenched and eye fixed on the trees ahead of me. My breathing was shallow, my heart racing. Under our feet, we felt something weaving back and forth, as if a great beast was patrolling the caverns. I couldn't tell if it was looking for us, or if it had already found us and was just toying with our minds before making a move. All I knew was that I had never seen Finn so scared. And if he was scared, Dan and I sure as hell should be terrified. We saw more holes in the ground, more open caverns where the forest split open. There was no telling how far these tunnels went or how many there were, snaking through the ground beneath our feet in all directions. For all we knew, this thing could have burrowed its way through every inch of land between here and Pine Haven. I thought about what Finn had said. Those roots were spreading. The earth rumbled again, more violently than before. I grabbed onto a tree for support while Finn stumbled and fell over, his hands in the snow and palms trembling against the moving ground. We all heard it. The shriek of many voices, human and animal, muffled through a layer of soil. Finn looked up at both of us, his face pale. In the dark, his lips formed a single word. Run. Neither of us listened. We didn't come all the way out here just to leave his ass behind. Daniel grabbed his arm and pulled him up in one swift motion, both of them staggering before getting to their feet again. Then the three of us abandoned all subtlety and began to race through the trees. My shotgun clenched in both hands the whole time. Every few steps it seemed as though we were faltered by another quake in the ground. Something was right below us, trying to dig its way out. Its screams were blood-curdling. I could make out the howl of wolves, the shrieks of humans, and the bellow of a cow amongst so many other blended noises. I didn't want to know what kind of vision went with the sound. To my right, I could see a mound of dirt and leaning trees, another hole in the earth. And from its depth, I could see a brief hint of rotten, fleshy limbs trying to drag itself up to the surface. Something was coming out of the ground. Something huge. I felt Daniel's hand grip my arm as he pulled me away from the shifting earth. The screams got louder, more furious, as something heavy pulled itself into the snow and began to run behind us with the footfalls of over a dozen different limbs. Every step made the trees shiver. I made the mistake of looking back then. Finn was right about the Hydra. When you see it, you understand. It was a horrendous mass of dead flesh, piled up on top of a blob-like body with hooves, arms, and legs sticking out in each direction as if they had melted together. It was covered in veins, pustules, and gaping mouths full of mismatched teeth. All were dripping with bits of flesh and blood from its recent meal. Atop its giant lump of a body were human torsos, each one branching out from the one below it like a system of branches. They were all screaming, mouths impossibly wide, ghostly white eyes shining in the darkness, arms flailing. I think I recognized some of them. I recalled those missing people, the ones who floated into the woods when the fog rolled in. Dear God. They had all fused together like some sort of grotesque centipede. Oh, Big Boy was bad to look at, sure, but flesh centipede? I had decided right there and then that flesh centipede was way fucking worse. Finn was screaming, noticing the way my fear distracted me. He wasn't faring much better, however, holding his arm up to his chest as he struggled to keep running. I watched his feet falter. He was stumbling, falling to his knees, and trying fruitlessly to get himself back up. Daniel let go of my arm and ran back, pulling Finn to his feet. The Hydra was gaining on us, throwing its weight in all directions and barreling through the trees. Its heavy body snapped them like toothpicks. I stopped and took up my shotgun, pointing it at one of the human torsos near the top. A single shot rang out, hitting dead flesh with a disgusting burst of dark, rotten blood. But the beast didn't even slow. When one corpse grew weak and limp, there were still many others. "Up! Get up!" I screamed, trying to help Dan get Finn to his feet, but the Hydra was gaining. I had to do something, and it had to be done real fucking quick. Then I remembered what the Rangers were coming out to do. To set the beasts on fire. "Finn, where's your flare gun?" I yelled in a panic. "Finn, where the fuck is it?" I tore the pack off Finn's shoulders and dug through it as quickly as I could, pulling out the flare gun and pointing it up at the beast. I didn't know if this would work. I didn't know if it would hurt it or just make it angry, but we were about to die if we didn't buy a few more seconds. I shot at the base of its body, an explosion of red and gold light hitting it full force and igniting the cold, dead flesh. Those legs stopped moving, now only flailing in an attempt to put out the flames. It let out a shriek so loud and so sharp that my ears started ringing. We left the pack behind. It didn't matter anymore. Once Finn was on his feet, the three of us ran as far away as we could get, leaving that beast in the flames behind. It was running again, stomping through the trees with more fury than ever before. But we had a chance. We could see the tower now, motivated by pure terror and adrenaline while those pounding footsteps grew louder behind us. We finally broke the tree line and fell into the snow in a pile of exhausted bodies. I looked back just in time to see the Hydra stop at the tree line, pushed back as if hitting an invisible wall. It shrieked and roared from every mouth, reaching its arms out to grab us. We were just far enough away to avoid its grasp. Somehow, even with the reliability of the radio signal to protect us, I didn't feel very safe. We filed into the building as quickly as we could, making distance between ourselves and that creature. When we got upstairs, I did the only thing that felt right. I hit the bell, sounding out a painful frequency that made that grotesque monster curl its limbs in agony. It took 2 tries before retreating to the woods to find a hole to crawl back into. Daniel held his head and tossed his hearing aid onto the floor, but I knew he wouldn't take it personally. Within moments, the monster was gone, no doubt returning to the bodies it had been saving for later. I had a feeling that the next time we saw it, the Hydra would be gaining a few more heads. "What the fuck was that?" I yelled. Finn answered, sitting on the floor and holding a hand against his bleeding face. "Oh, not that!" I laughed and cried hysterically at the same time, pacing back and forth. I'm talking about that big fucking hole in the ground. Where did that come from? How long has that been there? Finn just shook his head. I could tell he was just as perplexed as I was, wishing he knew. "Oh, monsters, we could handle. Weird, surreal bullshit in the radio station. We could handle. But a goddamn glowing hole to the center of the earth? Oh, I had no idea where to even start with that," Daniel said softly, leaning against the wall and trying to catch his breath. I recalled the look on Dan's face when he saw the pit for the first time. Mesmerized, entranced. He was ready to fall in and give himself to the void. Whatever was calling to the villagers was down there, and it was trying to take him first. Would it swallow us all? "You're hurt." I gestured to Daniel's hand, where a trail of blood was dripping through his fingers. He rolled up his sleeve gingerly, revealing a long gash he had gotten while running through the trees. He sighed. He was rooting around in his first aid kit by the time I crossed the room, pulling out my car keys and dropping them into his palm. "It's not fine," I said. "You and Finn both need to go get checked out. There's a hospital an hour out of town. You know." You and Finn both need to go get checked out. You and Finn both need to go get checked out. There's a hospital an hour out of town. You know the one. I curled his fingers in, closing his fist. take my truck. Get Finn to the ER. I'll watch the tree line tonight, all right? Don't argue with me. Dan glared at me for far too long, his mouth twitching as if trying to fight back. Then his eyes left my face to peer out the window, looking into that dark and snowy sky. It was quiet out there. But just because it was quiet didn't mean something wasn't watching us, waiting for another chance. He asked. Yes, I nodded, already pushing him toward the door. Now go. Both of you. Finn's burns could get infected if you wait. Our ranger friend was already on his way down the stairs, grumbling quietly at me. At least someone trusted my judgment. Dan glanced back at him, then at me, that worrisome look passing over his face once more. It'll be fine, I said sternly. It won't come back tonight. It seemed to convince him, even if his expression lacked confidence. We both knew someone had to stay. He took a deep breath, then wrapped me up in a tight hug and let the air out of his lungs. He said, letting me go at last. And keep the radio on. I know, it ain't my first rodeo. I gave him a smirk and pinched his cheek. Now, get the hell out of here, Danny boy. One last second of hesitation, and both of them were gone. I watched Daniel help Finn into the truck, closing the door behind him and looking up at the watchtower one last time before driving away. I gave them a little wave as they went, the lights of the vehicle disappearing down the dark and lonely road. The snow was falling heavier now. The lights of the village looked dim and far away, hidden behind a layer of frost spreading across the lookout window. I could feel a draft coming from the crack in the glass. It was just another sign that our only safe haven was beginning to crumble. As the hours passed slowly and the night grew impossibly dark, only a subtle rumble in the ground signified the Hydra's movements beneath the tree line. It was stalking the tower, going back and forth through the tunnels and looking for a way to pass the boundary. When dust fell from the ceiling and the stilts rocked, I wondered if that was what we felt all along. Perhaps it had been watching us all this time. The station itself was silent, almost eerily so. There were no voices from the pipes, no creaking floorboards, no shadows watching me from the corners. I was joined by something far worse. While helping myself to a cup of coffee at 1 o'clock in the morning, I noticed a bottle left on the countertop. Tequila. The same cheap shit I had stashed at my apartment. I poured it down the drain, tossing the empty bottle in the trash, and tried to drown out the lingering scent on my tongue with a hot, bitter sip of burnt coffee. I hardly got back to my desk when I noticed 2 full bottles sitting in front of my chair, having appeared as quickly as I could blink. And every time I poured one out, 2 more would take its place, like the heads of the Hydra. Oh, I don't want to read this chapter. Fuck. Oh, I don't want to read this chapter. 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 It's fine. I don't want to read this chapter. Fuck. Is it this chapter? Okay, there's Danny. Hold on. Let me triple check. Oh, are we not loading? I would love if you loaded. Properly? Properly? Load? Load. Load? Okay, this is highlighted weird, so hold on a second. I'm going to have to just scan through it. That's okay. All right, this is a dialogue chapter, so hold tight. I'm fine. Get some sleep. fuck, it's this chapter. Okay. All right, give me a second. I also have to adjust the gain, potentially. All right. Un memento, poor favors. Okay, loud noises incoming. This is your only warning. This is dialogue only. This place is a fucking nightmare. I couldn't take it anymore. I tried, but it keeps coming back. All of this bullshit. Dad's face. Jenny's body. These fucking bottles. I can't stand it any longer. They won't leave. Why won't they go away? Don't call me that. I'm not your Lenny. I was hers. Jen was here first, but now she's gone and I'll never get her back. And you know why? Because of the stupid fucking place. It took Jenny. It took my dad. It almost took Finn, and now it's trying to take you. It's never gonna be okay. You can't leave me too. Please, you can't. You can't. Nothing that goes in there ever comes out. That's why it's calling you, Danny. So you fall in and never come out. The bottles just appeared. I knew throwing them in was the only way to get rid of them for good, and that's what would happen to you too. Thank you, Danny. Hey, Danny boy. How long was I asleep? Like the stale dog shit stuck to the bottom of my truck. Well, it's a very specific feeling. Are you mad at me? I didn't mean it. Those things I said, it wasn't true. Comparing you and Jenny is just being here where she died every day. I miss her so much, you know? But I think if you were gone, I'd miss you more, so don't go anywhere, okay? Pinky swear? I hate doing laundry anyway. I'm sorry I punched you, by the way. That wasn't very nice. You're an asshole. Thanks, I hate it. Didn't want to do that again, but at least I didn't have to read it this time. I will take it because I didn't have to narrate it entirely this time. So I will take it. All right, chapter 11. This is also. Fuck. Okay, chapter 11 is fins, so give me a second because this is dialogue only. I love you, Padunk. Hello, you amazing. I appreciate you. Yeah, well, it's not so easy. Are you home? You told me to call you. You said if I needed to talk to you, not as a mentor, but as a friend that I should call. I'm not drunk, just thinking. I've been watching TV at Dan's house all night. Not much. One thing was stuck with me. It was some documentary, history stuff. Oh. This story about a Scottish lighthouse. It got me thinking. Ugh, you wish. No, I guess it just seemed really familiar. Eerily so. It happened over 100 years ago. 3 lighthouse keepers all went missing and no one ever figured out why. The whole place was frozen in time. Clock stopped. Raincoats still hanging up. They had tables set for dinner and everything. Sure, but still, even if it was a storm, isn't that what we're saying right now? It's always a storm. It's always just weather. There were 3 lighthouse keepers. There were 3 of us. And when the storm rolled in, they were just gone. But we could. We could. It would be easy. You're probably right. Still, I won't feel good about this until Dan stops trying to feed himself to the woods. I'm half a step away from tying him to his bed while he sleeps. Shut up, asshole. You haven't called me that in a long time. 30. No, I think I'll be okay. Thanks, by the way. Thanks for picking up. You too. Okay. That was chapter 11. Not bad. So far, so good. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let me see. So I've got 12, 13. Stop it. Stop it. Oh, God damn it. Can we not? 13. 14. 15. 16. Okay, so 20, 30. Hold on a second, guys. 40. 50. 65. Cool. About 65 pages left total, I think. Oh, I hope you're having a good time. Happy to have you. All right. 65 pages usually equates to a handful of time. I'm going to take a quick bathroom break, and I will be right back. Okay, we are back. So, was that saved? Yeah, it was. Okay. Great. I think I can do. We'll see what we can do. Either way, we're gonna get into chapter 12. Chapter 12. The Nest. Evelyn. I spent one night in the hospital, then 3 nights stuck in bed. Everything was a blur when we left the tower. I remember Daniel picking me up and carrying me to the truck, putting me in the passenger seat. I had my head against the cold window, nauseous and dizzy, watching the snow fly by while he spoke to Finn over the phone in a hushed voice. When I began to doze, I dreamed. When I began to doze, I dreamed about riding along at night with my dad, and how I'd pretended to be fast asleep so he'd carry me inside and tuck me in. The hum of the tires and the occasional flash of headlights creeping between my eyelids brought me right back. But once we passed through those hospital doors, those nostalgic moments ended. I was half awake when they wheeled me in. The staff was arguing about how I was still alive. They were talking about frostbite, hypothermia, blood alcohol levels, and a stomach pump. It felt like a dream. I finally came to my senses when the tube was shoved down my throat, bringing up something large and dark that stretched my pipes on the way out with a painful, hot sting. I didn't get a good look at what they found in my stomach, but one of the nurses screamed as it fell into the metal pan. It left a taste in my mouth like rotten meat and blood. My tongue was numb and swollen for hours. The day they let me go, Daniel was the one to drive me home. Not to my own apartment, but to his. I could take care of myself, I argued while we were in the car. Daniel said there was no sign of humor in his voice. No teasing, no playing. Bullshit, I rasped, my head against the window. You just want to make sure I don't start drinking again. Dan was quiet for a moment, watching the road. I saw his knuckles tighten on the steering wheel just a little bit. He said softly. He paused, and I watched his eyes searching for an answer, as if it would pop up in the road in front of him. But you can't be sure? I asked. Dan said. He turned on our street, putting his blinker on even though no one else was on the road. I crinkled my nose at him, both playful and uncomfortable at the same time. Thankfully, the conversation was over, and Daniel was already parking the car and helping me out of the passenger seat when I was too dizzy to stand on my own. I tried to shove him off and walk up the stairs, but it didn't work out so well for me. After one stumble, I was holding his arm and leaning against him, my warm forehead against his cold jacket sleeve. The frozen flakes felt nice against my skin for a change. He just ran his fingers through my hair, not even minding the grease. Daniel said after he got me settled down on the couch. He dropped an extra hoodie down in front of me. What about you? I asked. Who's going to stay at the tower with you? He didn't say anything at first. He was in the kitchen. He didn't say anything at first. He was in the kitchenette, heating up a dented aluminum tea kettle on the stove. He finally said, giving me a smirk full of false confidence. Well, sure, I trust you, but it's just that I worry about... He said, pulling a box of chamomile tea bags out of the top cupboard. No, you won't, I teased back as he put a mug down in front of me. Take an old Halloween decoration out of the shed and prop it up in a chair. It'll be just like the real... I suddenly paused, gagging as painful acid built up in my throat. I covered my mouth with both hands and rolled off the couch, half running, half stumbling, to the bathroom. It all came up a moment later. Black sludge, something solid and wet, and a torrent of hot steam. As I coughed, sprang droplets of dark, warm ooze on the rim of the toilet. The pain shooting up from my stomach to my mouth made it hard to breathe. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel standing in the doorway, too hesitant to come closer. I didn't blame him. There was a rotten taste left in my mouth and a smell that was just as bad, like a dead bird on hot pavement. Whatever came out of my stomach was still moving in the water, wiggling. Daniel flushed it quickly and handed me a damp washcloth to wipe my mouth with. A washcloth that ended up in the trash not long after. As I sat on the bathroom floor with a stained face and mats in my hair, I found myself looking up at Daniel and seeing the disappointment on his face. He said he was proud of me not too long ago. Perhaps now he would take that back. In time, the vomiting ceased. The fever broke. The shakes were still shaken, but more manageable than before. I spent my days huddled under blankets and wearing 2 pairs of sweatpants simultaneously. Some nights I would bounce between my own place and Dan's, breaking into his intimidatingly clean apartment so that I could watch shitty daytime television. He didn't seem to mind. In fact, he always looked relieved to find me there when he got home from work. But I had an ulterior motive. You see, Daniel was still sleepwalking. I realized it on the first night I stayed over at his house, the glow of the television in a dark room making my eyes sting whenever I stirred from my sleep. I could only stay asleep for an hour or 2 at most, constantly being jolted awake by unpleasant dreams of the forest or intense bouts of nausea. Often, the quiet ramblings of some midnight infomercial would lull me back to sleep, but at roughly 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke to find that I wasn't alone. "Danny," I croaked when my vision adjusted. I saw him standing in the corner of the room, staring at the wall. "Dan, what's wrong?" He didn't answer me. He was swaying slightly, weak and dizzy, facing the darkness. The light from the television surrounded the edges of his body, where I could see him shaking in the cold. No shirt, no socks, just a pair of boxers and bare, flat feet on the carpet. He was whispering, but his voice blended with the fuzzy audio from some commercial for a kitchen cleaner. "Danny?" I stood up, pushing aside the blanket. My whole body felt heavier than before, and I was freezing, even with a soft hoodie and hospital socks. "Danny, come on. You're being weird." I reached for his shoulder, but I wasn't expecting the intense chill that I felt. His muscles were tense, his body stiff and cold like ice. He didn't even budge. I whispered his name one more time as I craned my neck to peek around him, getting a glance at his blank, mystified face. Daniel's eyes were wide open and dark. His lips were parted and glistening with drool, moving quickly in some indecipherable chant. He was dreaming about it again. I knew he was. The forest, the hole in the earth, the temptation to jump. "Dan, come on, let's get you back to bed," I said as I began to push his shoulders. He didn't move. In fact, he rooted himself to the spot even harder than before, shrugging me off with an elbow. "Ow!" "Ow, asshole! Come on, buddy, you gotta wake up now." I touched his shoulder one more time, but he didn't like that. In an instant, Dan shook me off and pushed me away with one arm, stomping across the room to the window. I watched him place his hands on the glass, steam forming from his frantic breath. He fumbled with the lock and slid it upward, his fingers clawing at the screen while a gust of cold air rushed in. "Dan, stop!" I yelled as I grabbed him around the waist and started to pull him away. His fingertips were turning red, the wire of the screen cutting into his skin as he tried desperately to tear it apart. Only when I managed to drag him away did he give up on the window, stomping to the door instead. It was locked up tightly, but he still tried to pull the chain and rattle the hinges. At this point, I was already rushing to grab my phone. If I couldn't stop him from losing his goddamn mind and breaking out of here, I'd have to get the police involved. Just as I started to dial the number, a heavy bang made me jump out of my skin. Daniel had punched the door, leaving a fist-shaped imprint in the center. That was enough to wake him up. He yelled out, stumbling back, and clutched his injured knuckles to his chest. He was panting for breath and shaking from head to toe. He had no idea what was going on. Hey, settle down. It's okay," I said as I dropped my phone and sat on the floor next to him. As he began to hyperventilate, I wrapped my arms around his chest from behind and held him tightly to the spot. He was unusually warm. "You were sleepwalking again. You're fine," he started, trying to wrap his head around the scene in front of him. TV static, cold air, and snow rushing in from the window, a dent in the door, my breathless and pale face staring at him in terror. "I don't know, buddy," I said, grabbing his hand to take a look at his bloodied, splintered knuckles. but I think we're going to have to put those mittens on you after all. We locked the apartment back up, but I knew it wouldn't work forever. A couple of days after that incident, a neighbor caught him trying to climb out the window again. Only this time he had a knife in his hand and had cut through the screen. One trip to the store later, we were putting locks on everything and counting the knives before he went to bed. And still, that light coming from the woods after dark just kept getting brighter. Going back was a difficult decision. I still felt wrong, like whatever was inside my body had ripped me to pieces on its way out, but I couldn't stay away. I knew where I belonged. When I got up the stairs and into the broadcast room on a blustery morning, my lungs were aching from the long walk. I didn't count, but I think those extra 17 steps were back. All at once, I was greeted to the usual smell of burnt coffee and the sight of my 2 coworkers lazily going about their day. Finn was standing at the back of the room, having a cigarette next to the sink. I told him not to smoke in here, but he didn't listen. His bandages were off, the twisted skin beneath still raw and pink, while his face and hair were shaved on one side to clean up the uneven mess. Believe it or not, burn scars kinda suited him. With a cloud of smoke around his head and one arm in a sling, he never looked tougher. Meanwhile, Daniel was at the desk, actually doing his job. Sort of. I could see he was already getting his collection of Christmas hats out because on his head was a stupid little band with reindeer antlers on it. It jingled every time he moved, and I already hated it. He announced into his microphone, arms spread out. Daniel gave a stupid gap-tooth grin and started giggling when I kicked the base of his chair. Fucking creature. You're not live, are you? I groaned, tossing my coat to the side. Finn was there in less than 10 seconds to put it on the coat rack where it belonged, giving me a disgruntled side eye. Dan answered, turning off his microphone with the push of a button. He cracked his knuckles proudly and shoved his thumbs under his suspenders. Dan stuck one lanky leg out and kicked my chair away from the desk for me. I plopped down in my chair, head set around my neck, and a tired scowl on my face. I guess it's kind of good to be back. You rat bastard sumbitch. Finn said from the back of the room, putting out his cigarette in a makeshift ashtray he had fashioned from an old peanut butter lid. He was stirring a cup of coffee, which he put down in front of me. I groaned loudly, leaning back in my seat and slumping down as if all my bones had been sucked down in my body. Ugh. I was enjoying the nice weather, I said, gesturing out to the overcast, snowy sky and the frost that was collecting on the lookout window. The fog days were becoming more common than ever, happening once or twice a week on average. Most of the time the radio did its job. That constant, quiet signal was enough to keep the various beasts at bay and stop the fog at the tree line. But they were getting bolder. We all knew that. And if there was a way to get the radio tower down, they were sure as hell going to try at every single available opportunity. Daniel asked, that cheery look on his face fading away and replaced with the all-familiar stress. Something about the doe-eyed, worried expression mixed with the reindeer hat was so depressing. Finn was already lighting up a second cigarette. He commented, patting Dan on his shoulder. He was looking at Daniel specifically. He remembered that night just as clearly as the rest of us did, perhaps even more. Finn lived at the edge of town. Finn lived at the edge of the town, in an old farmhouse that was now standing on its last legs thanks to the damage the fog had done. It would take a long time to fix it back up, and even longer to fix this place's rotten reputation. I still had nightmares about it. It was no wonder Pinehaven was shrinking down to a microscopic level. Generator. Lockdown. No distractions. Got it. I counted off the steps on my fingers. The snow was already starting to fall a little heavier, the wind whistling through the crack in the lookout window. I noticed Finn step from one foot to the other, listening to a creak in the floorboards. A little bit, I shrugged, sipping my coffee and watching the nearest pines turn white. Keeps getting worse, too, every time this place starts to shake and shimmy. Which, if you haven't noticed, is all the time. Finn snapped impatiently. I could see his gaze fixed on the window, on that fragile corner just waiting to shatter. Cracks in the walls. There was a silent, unsteady moment between the three of us. As the wind whistled through the trees and pushed against the stilts holding us up, the chill in the air was more than just the draft. I should put a tarp over my truck at night, too, just in case we need to mosey out. You think? I was already standing up, putting my headset down and pushing in my chair. Tarp's still out in the shed? Finn nodded, but he never looked my way. There's one thing you've got to know about this place when it comes to wintertime, and that's this. When it snows, it really fucking snows. This garbage was coming down like it meant it, like it had a date with the ground that it just needed to keep. When I reached the bottom step, my ratty old boots didn't stand a chance, and all at once I felt the immense discomfort of moisture against the toes of my socks. Great. I was going to think about that for the rest of the day. I trudged through the freezing white bullshit, leaving a trail of grumpy footprints behind me. Once I got to the shed, I squinted up at one of the security cameras. It was propped there on the side, right in one corner where the guys in the station could certainly see me having a fantastic time. The door was harder to open than usual, sticking in the snow. That issue came secondary, however, as I could see the broken fibers of something organic pulling apart as the door scraped open. At first, I thought it was just a thick spider web stuck in the crack, but then I heard the buzzing. As the dim light of an overcast sky pooled in through the dusty windows, I could see clustered shapes of giant wasp nests that were stuck to almost every surface of the shed. The walls, the shelves, even the generator itself was covered in the stuff. Sticky, disgusting goo dripped from the ceiling, and larvae wriggled and inched across the floor like a living carpet. My skin didn't just crawl. It tried to turn itself inside out. I fucking hate wasps. Ow, shit. I felt a sharp sting to my hand as one of the little pricks, big and angry, stung at my knuckles while I forced the door open. Another one got the side of my neck. A third got my thumb. There were tons of them, all clustered around the doorknob and furiously circling. I backed up, holding my stinging hand as the spot started to swell. But I didn't come all the way out here, getting my socks wet in the snow, for nothing. The tarps weren't very far. I stepped into the shed and reached for one, pulling it out and dragging it across the nasty, infested ground as my boots sank into the soft piles of larvae. The hornets were crowding me, buzzing in my face the whole time. But before I left, I saw something in the corner of the shed, hidden in the shadows beneath an old woodworking table. Something large was moving around, skittering across the floor. Nope. Nope, no thanks. Absolutely not, to be precise. I trudged my way back, but Finn apparently had other ideas. He was already on his way down the stairs, a green canister in his hand before I managed to reach the parking lot. He called down from the middle of the stairs while I stood at the bottom, my pant legs wet from the snow and my skin itchy. Enjoy the show? I asked dryly, scratching at my hand. Ugh, little assholes got me good. Finn was shaking the can in his hand with a sharp metallic rattle. I gave a grumpy whine as he passed by, off to take care of business while I protected my old truck from the impending storm. That would have been great to know before I went in there, I shouted after him. He laughed, simply yelling back. The snow was already building up on the truck. I brushed it away with my hands, the icy cold sting feeling oddly soothing against my burning skin. I got the tarp draped over it well enough on my own, but all the while I couldn't shake the eerie chill I felt. It was like being naked and exposed in a crowd, watched by so many eyes. They were out there, in the woods. They were hidden between the branches, watching from the tops of trees and the hazy blur of falling snow. I could hear the motion of dead leaves and the flutter of wings, A shrill screech rang out above me, and I saw that ugly little mountain bird land at the borderline between safety and the wild horrors of the forest. He didn't always screech and chirp, but when he did, his voice sounded so strange, like the high-pitched yell of a man trapped in a tiny throat. "What do you want?" I glared at Bartholomew, and he glared back. He shrieked again, like a piercing alarm cutting through the wind. It was so loud, so sharp, that I put a hand up to my ear. It was then I noticed my... It was then I noticed the way my skin was changing colors. Those large, violent welts where the wasps had stung were now starting to double in size, colored a horrible, putrid black under the skin. I made the mistake of poking one. Dear God, it was the worst thing I could have possibly done. The swollen wound burst, a spray of hot, black ooze bubbling out of my skin and burning like hot grease. It dripped down between my fingers and into the snow, forming more welts as it went. Disgust is not a strong enough word. I shrieked and shoved my hands down in the snow, gagging as the smell hit my nose. I couldn't tell if that shit was from the wasps or if it was inside my bloodstream. One of those options was much more disturbing than the other. I won't describe in any vivid detail how Daniel and I managed to get all of that black ooze out of my skin, but let's just say we both decided to skip lunch. I was covered in bandages, sealing up all of the open wounds as we tried to have a somewhat normal day. The station was acting up, as it were. At noon, the snow started to go back up into the sky. For about 15 minutes, all of the flakes paused in the air, hovered for a moment, and then began to rise. We watched from the window, staring at this spectacle as if watching a magic trick. Problem was, when they came back down, they all came down together. At 1 o'clock, another quake hit. The radio tower next to us started to shake and lean a little more than before, the blinking light at the top of its peak flickering slightly. We decided to report a wind advisory for the town, letting the remaining villagers know to prepare their homes for a storm. At 2 o'clock, we got a call from someone in town. It was a man talking about a strange dog that had been walking back and forth at the tree line just outside of his farmhouse.
He's got backwards feet and a tongue that reaches the ground. Something about his face doesn't sit right with me. No, ma'am. I think it's sick. So if someone out there missing an ugly dog, it's near Lancaster Street.
At 2:30, the man called back with a shaken voice, saying,
Never mind, you don't want this dog.
He hung up immediately after. We never figured out what he meant. At 3 o'clock, we all made the mistake of leaving the room at the same time to shoo away a normal-sized buck with abnormal-sized antlers who was trying to attack one of our security cameras. When we got back up to the broadcast tower, the desk and chairs were stuck to the ceiling, upside down. It took way too long to delicately move everything back to the floor and put it all back together again without damaging the equipment. And at 4 o'clock, the sun was already starting to set. It was time to get the generator out and prepare for that winter storm we had been thinking about all day. The snow was coming down so hard now that it was difficult to see in front of our own faces. We marched out to the shed in a single-file line, preparing for a room full of dead insects and empty nests. At first glance, that was exactly what we got. We pulled open the door, kicking aside the remains of a wasp nest that had been partially shredded, no doubt by the hundreds of dead insects now clustered beneath it. Daniel stood at the back of the group. He didn't do bugs. Fair enough, honestly, because these little freaks were not exactly ordinary. I picked one up, holding it by the wings and squinting at its curled-up body. It was huge, first of all. It was about the size of my thumb. The worst part of it all, though? This stupid little sucker had teeth. It had 2 big black eyes and a crooked set of antennae, but below that was a mouth with tiny razor-sharp teeth on display in a permanent grimace of death. Wow, I hate it, I said, tossing the wasp over my shoulder into the snow. Apparently it got a little too close to Daniel, who shrieked and jumped out of the way. Ugh, let's get the generator out of here and then burn this place to the ground. I'll buy us a new shed. It was easier said than done. The nests had encased the generator over time, curling around it like a big cocoon. I kicked at it a few times, shaking it loose, getting my heel stuck inside it more than once. The fact that all the wasps were dead didn't decrease the primal panic that I felt every time my foot would sink into the mess of plant fiber and various gooey secretions. Ugh, were they supposed to be filled with goo? Danny, get in here, I called out the door. We need help pushing this thing. I heard a shuffle behind us, back in the corner of the room. Something was moving around in the darkness, digging through the junk and toppling over a couple of old cardboard boxes. Dan finally responded, peeking from around the door. Finn hushed him. Now we were both staring at that corner, waiting for something to show itself. It was quiet. The sounds of movement silenced and nothing visible to the naked eye. I crept forward just a step or two, squinting in the darkness to try getting a better look. Something hissed, angry and agitated. I gave a snort of laughter. I'm probably a raccoon. Sounds like he's pissed off. Poor widow baby. We all heard it. A loud and sinister buzzing came from the corner, followed by the scuttle of many legs against the floor. It was so fast that I barely saw a glimpse of the thing before it flew out of the shadows and straight towards me. A wasp the size of a... My bad. A wasp the size of a fat house cat came flying out from the shadows, wrapping all of its terrible, sticky legs around my head and trying to sting at my face. I put my arms up, smacking it away as best as I could. The sound it made was impossibly bad to the ears, like a buzzing mixed with the shriek of an angry possum. I screamed and flailed my arms, spinning around in a circle to try escaping it. It was biting me, digging little needle teeth into my arms and my hands, scratching at the top of my head and getting its legs stuck in my hair. Finn was quick to spring into action. He grabbed it by its wings and tossed it to the ground, lifting his boot up and stomping down with one sudden step that burst the thing's insides into a flood of disgusting gooey liquid. It got everywhere. All over my pants, his boots, the floor, the generator. I was still clutching at the top of my head, hoping none of its little children were floating around in my hair somewhere. Daniel called out, still standing outside in the snow like a chicken shit. Oh, I hoped he was freezing. Finn told him with an intimidating glare before he turned to me. Gah, yeah, I nodded, pulling a trace of black goo out of my hair. Oh, gross. I'm just hoping that thing didn't lay eggs inside my skull. Ugh. The ground was wrapped in a blanket of heavy snow. The layer of ice beneath it was slippery against our feet. We pushed the generator along, trying to get it as close to the broadcast tower as possible, all while racing the night sky. The wind was violent now, burning against our faces as a spinning vortex of snow blinded us from the view ahead. We got the machine underneath the stairs, enough to protect it from the worst of winter's fury. From down below, we could hear the creak of the wooden stilts and the metal steps. The radio tower, reaching high up into the dark and cloudy sky, was shivering like an old tree about to give in. When we got to the top, the draft was worse. It was colder. That crack in the window had grown just a little bit more. Oh no, I hope I don't fall. Yeah, it was gross. Oh, I appreciate that. We are live narrating is what we are doing. All right, let's see. I think I have time before I have to go get Mr. Holmes to do one more. Let's see. What is this one? Oh, this is only 11 pages. That should be fine. We get 12? Yeah, we got 12. Okay. All right, give me just a second. Get water and take a break for a minute. Okay. Testing. Chapter 13. Extra Steps. Evelyn. Daniel's voice was muffled through the door as I stood at the bathroom sink, feeling sick to my stomach and staring into the running water that circled the drain. The pipes were noisy again, but this time it wasn't Jennifer's sobbing or the whispers of ghosts. It was something else underground. It was something big that jostled the pipes and made them rattle, the sound carrying all the way up from deep, deep below the snow and ice. After rinsing out the disgusting taste in my mouth, I went back to the broadcast room, sitting backwards on my chair and slowly spinning it in a circle. Ugh, I hate this shit, I said after a moment of tense silence. The waiting, the anxiety. At any normal place, we'd be preparing to evacuate right now or closing the station down for safety, not sitting up here with our thumbs up our asses. Finn said from across the room. He was staring out the window and watching the snow. I screwed up my face in a grimace, resting my chin against the back of the chair. The floor trembled beneath our feet, and I watched Daniel visibly shudder at the feeling. He asked, gesturing one hand toward the cracked window. Finn didn't have an answer for that one. Neither did I. In the end, I suppose giving it our best shot was all we could do, but man, I couldn't help but feel like the year before wasn't nearly this bad. We survived snowstorms last winter, remember? I said, giving Danny's chair a playful little kick. We made hot cocoa and had a little sleepover party. Everything turned out fine, he said with a scoff. And we survived, I said, tossing my hands up in mock celebration. That's the party! Come on, Danny boy, let me make you a drink and we'll put on a Christmas movie or something. There's no use freaking the fuck out until something actually happens. I pushed my chair in and got to work digging around in the kitchen cupboards, peeking in a half-empty canister of cocoa powder to make sure no insects had decided to take up residence. While I started heating water in the microwave, Finn was pulling his car keys out of his pocket. He said, slipping his gloves back on his hands. Daniel stared up at him. Daniel stared at him with a crinkle between his eyebrows. He asked. Finn was clearly mulling something over in his mind, chewing on a toothpick. It was one of those little things he did when he was nervous and didn't want to light up a smoke right in the middle of the broadcast room, he said. When he pushed the door open, a heavy gust came rolling in and brought flakes of fat, fluffy snow with it. The door shut heavily behind him and shook the whole building, trapping what bit of warmth we still had. Daniel was still watching Finn stomp down the stairs while I was hunting for 2 clean mugs. He told me as he leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms over his chest. The way everything's going is shit. He's probably just saying that to be safe, I said as I peered around the countertops. I could see the back of Dan's head as he stared forward at the window and the camera monitors. You want marshmallows? He didn't answer at first. He was still as in... He didn't answer at first. He was still as an ice sculpture, both hands on the desk, just staring off into the distance and taking slow, heavy breaths. I couldn't quite tell if he was lost in thought or starting to fall asleep. Dan, I yelled out, you want marshmallows? Yes or no? He turned finally, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Yes to marshmallows, I repeated as I stirred up his hot cocoa and dropped a generous handful of slightly stale marshmallows on top. My steps were careful as I approached the desk and placed the mug down far away from the keyboard. It was a wise idea, too, because within seconds, the ground began to shiver again. Ugh. Flesh centipede is on the move again, I said with a grunt as I sat back down in my chair. Daniel asked with a look of disgust on his face. I stuck my tongue out at him, immature and playful. Boo, I said. Flesh centipede is way better than Hydra. Also, you got to name Bartholomew, so this one's mine. Daniel snorted and smirked to himself while sipping his cocoa. I could tell that it was hard for him to laugh, even just that tiny chuckle. We both remembered the last time we let our guard down, dancing in front of the lookout window and wearing stupid Christmas hats when we should have been keeping our eyes on the horizon. Could we have stopped the fires? The slaughter? I doubt it, but people were still dead. Oh, shit! I hissed under my breath, holding onto the desk as a tremor passed through the floor. It traveled across the room from one end to the other, like a wave. As it did, the power flickered for only a moment in time, long enough to make both of our hearts sink to our toes before our screens came back to life. The hanging light bulb above our heads was slow to turn back on, swinging slightly amidst the shaking structure. I heard it fizzle and buzz as it came back to life, its color beginning to change. It was subtle at first. That yellow glow that once filled the room with a sickly kind of hue was colder, darker, stranger. It filled the broadcast room with an eerie purple light that made the walls look like a late twilight sky. I couldn't help but stare. It reminds me of something, I said, staring slack-jawed. Okay, I think it's the cats. I said, it reminds me of something, I said, staring slack-jawed at the ceiling while the light continued to sway back and forth on a long, tangled cord. I don't know what, but every time I see it, I feel something. Daniel wasn't saying anything, but I heard a clatter from across the room. He was standing now, his back to me. The sound was his headset, having been slid off of his ears and onto the floor next to his desk. You okay? I asked him while stepping forward and reaching for his shoulder. My fingers touched the seam of his jacket, but I never saw his face. Immediately, my gaze was drawn to the forest. It was so bright. That color, mixing between warm pink and cool purple tones, was pulsing in waves that spread out from above the trees. My chest felt tight looking at it. I observed every fluctuation in its shape, every tendril of light that crept from its center, and how it grew and grew and grew. It was beautiful. Not beautiful like a painting, but beautiful like a perfect memory. It was my dad coming home and telling me that he was safe. It was Jennifer safely tucked away in my bed. It was a swell of hope. Everything would be all right. Everything would be perfect. I stared into that burst of light and color until it was the only thing that I could see anymore. I'm not even sure I blinked. I'm not sure I even blinked. The air was sharp with that kind of cold that goes all the way down to your bones, but I didn't mind the shiver. My heart began to race. My stomach was tight. All I heard was the hum of the forest, majestic and steady and perfect in every way. This was home. There was no telling how long the light captured me. I blinked and everything was different. A sudden, painful, intensely cold breath left my lungs, and a rotten scent entered. I was on my back in the snow, my hair soaked and my fingers frozen solid. It was hard to see, so very, very hard to see. Daniel cried out. All at once, I realized the fog was all around me. We were outside the tower, collapsed in the snow as if we had been tossed there, and Daniel's silhouette was stumbling toward me in the mist. I felt him grab my shoulders, sliding his hands down the length of my arms until he could tangle our fingers together in a shaking, terrified hold. The ground was shaking. The whole earth was spinning. How the fuck did we get out here? What happened? I asked, the panic rising in my voice as I tried not to fall back into the snow on cold, weak legs. God damn it, Dan, what happened? He shouted back, but his voice was just one sound of many. The shivering of the trees made way for a low, ancient creak. The forest was moving. We heard the wailing. We heard the distant moans and groans of tortured voices. We heard the heavy steps. We heard the scraping of claws against wood and the gargle of blood-filled lungs. The light from the forest was dim. Somehow, in some way, it had tricked us both this time. I could hear the phone ringing from up in the tower. We weren't far from it, still in the clearing, just inches from the tree line, but in that unknown sliver of time, the fog had rolled in, pooling around our ankles and mixing with the heavy snow that made the wet jelly of our eyes burn. The cold was nothing compared to the bigger problem at hand, the sound of slick, scurrying limbs digging through snow and soil and the angry grunts of something large. Move! I pushed Daniel forward, squinting up into the snow to see the red, blinking light of the radio tower. He stumbled on cold, weak legs, his joints as frozen and sore as mine. In only 2 steps, he disappeared, too far for me to catch up as I tripped over ice, roots, and something that wiggled beneath my feet. I could hear his steps on the metal stairs, but he stopped. He reached for me. The vision of his hand stretched outward, cutting through the heavy mist. I tried to push him away, tried to reject his hold, but he wouldn't leave. Daniel grabbed my wrist and pulled me along, my ankles hitting the sharp edge of the steps. I could have argued. I could have told him he was wasting time and being foolish, putting us both at risk, but there was no time. I held onto the railing tightly while the tower trembled and rocked from side to side. Every step I took up those stairs felt like fire in my legs. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 15, 16, 17. It didn't end. We just kept climbing higher and higher. There were more steps than ever before. And as I looked up into the cloudy sky, I saw it. That swirling mass of purple light, still hovering over us like a full moon. It wasn't just in the ground anymore. It was in the sky, floating far between the clouds like a second sun. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like it could see me. Another set of footsteps joined ours, these ones heavier, wetter, and more abundant. We were being chased up the tower by something that groaned and gasped in a suffocated death rattle, as if its mouth was filled with sludge and debris. I heard the way its wet feet and hands slapped against the cold steel. It was gaining on us. As we slipped and struggled for breath, it took the stairwell and tossed its weight from side to side. The stairwell and tossed it and struggled for breath. As we slipped and struggled for breath. Shit. Hold on a second. Okay. As we slipped and struggled for breath, it shook the stairwell and tossed its weight from side to side. I heard Daniel gasp through the roaring wind. Don't look, just go! I screamed back at him, pushing against his back. But the temptation was eating away at me too. For just a split second, I turned my head, enough to see clammy, rotten hands grasping at the railing one after the other. It was the thing that already found me once, pacing back and forth in front of my apartment on the night of the invasion. In the back of my mind, I could still hear the way it scratched on the walls and how it threw itself against the door. It had gained many more limbs now, stealing them from our neighbors, attaching them to itself. Every limb, every hand, and every claw was fighting to get to me and claim the parts it didn't get last time. The staircase never seemed to end. We were high above the trees now, at altitudes I didn't even think were possible. My lungs were burning, my legs were shaking and giving out, and Daniel was struggling to breathe just a foot in front of me. Finally, I heard it. He tossed himself against the door and forced it open with a shoulder, crying out in pain. He didn't let the door close behind him. His hand reached for me, and in the swirling fog, I could see those dark eyes filled with terror and care. My cold hand slipped out of his grasp, and he grabbed my shoulder instead, clutching the sleeve of my coat. A sharp, damp sting caught one of my legs. A dead hand had wrapped around it, holding it in a violent grip. And suddenly, I was being pulled in two directions. In the blinding snow, I couldn't see the thing that grabbed me, but I could see the sickening horror in Daniel's expression. He looked like he was about to be sick. He yelled through gritted teeth. "Turn on the radio, you stupid!" I didn't finish my thought before I was yanked away from the open door. My coat slid off of my shoulders and into Dan's hands, the thing behind me succeeding in this painful game of tug-of-war. I screamed as it pulled me down the stairs, one clang at a time, the back of my head hitting the freezing cold metal. On my back, I finally saw its face. The mound of flesh with spider-like limbs had many sets of human eyes on a disfigured, lumpy head. Its huge, gaping mouth was filled with wriggling appendages. What first appeared to be worms were actually human fingers, reaching out from its throat and curling out of its mouth like feelers covered in blood and sludge. It voiced muffled groans as it pressed its weight against me, one of its rotten, dripping hands wrapping around my throat, while the others held my limbs down against the stairs. I freed one leg, only because I was able to wiggle out of a loosely tied shoe. I brought my knee up onto its round, fleshy abdomen and kicked as hard as I could. The sensation was disgusting, like driving my knee into a cold, wet bag full of eels. The thing was heavy and swollen. When my knee met its flesh, that thin section of veiny, pale skin started to agitate until the flesh broke, and a long, damp, knobby arm came reaching out of the center of its body. It birthed another limb, covered in blood and ooze. As soon as it had broken free, it grabbed my bare ankle and jammed it down onto the stairs with the kind of force that made the metal shake and my teeth clench with pain. Stinking, steaming dark liquid splattered onto my face and neck as the creature voiced muffled screams, its eyes wide and enraged. The pain against my bare skin was second only to the burn I felt as it began to pull on my arms and legs, my hands turning purple from the force of its grip. It was trying to tear them off. I shook my head and struggled against it, trying to get loose as images of my arms and legs being torn off of my body flooded my imagination. No, stop, don't! The panic rose as my shoulders popped, and I let out a screech of pain. My joints ached. I screamed at the thing's face, trying and failing to butt my head against its skull in a final effort to free myself. I was going to die in pieces. It was going to rip me apart. And all the while, that light in the sky was right behind its head, pulsing and humming like a beacon, drawing me home to the forest. I heard a single ear-splitting shot. A bullet went through the creature's malformed skull, whizzing past the side of my head and lodging itself in one of the wooden beams of the tower. It was followed by another and another, these ones sticking into the body of the monster and sending a spray of its rotten blood flying in all directions as if the thing's fat body burst like a swollen infection. I heard heavy steps, then a gruff voice cursing as Fenn's boot kicked the creature aside, sending it rolling off of me. He looked down at me with a mixture of disappointment and relief, grabbing the back of my shirt and pulling me up before he put another 2 bullets in the head of that fucker that tried to rip off my limbs. The fog was fading now. The extra steps were gone, placing us back at eye level with the forest. Daniel had gotten the radio started again. No doubt, and the signal was slowly pushing the mist up the mountain, 1 inch at a time. I watched him stumble out of the door and stand at the top of the stairs, his long legs shaking and his chest heaving with panicked breaths. Dan asked, tripping down the first step on his way to me. Finn said, already dragging the twitching, wriggling body of that hideous spider monstrosity down the stairs. Daniel looked at me for confirmation, and I could see that internal struggle. He was fighting with 2 different brands of guilt right now, that temptation to hang back and help, wrestling with the responsibility to protect the greater good. His expression turned soft and weary, and it was only then that I realized I had tears streaming down one side of my face. In the panic shuffle, I didn't even know I was crying. Hiding my face with one arm, I rubbed the mucus and blood off my skin and marched up the last few steps to the top, shaking like a leaf the whole way. He did the right thing. I parroted Finn's words, stretching one sore shoulder. As I listened to my joints pop, Daniel was grabbing the discarded boot that the creature had torn off of my foot, wiping it off with a mitten that was shoved in his pocket. He grimaced at the smell that still clung to it. He handed it to me with a grimace. We both looked down at the bottom of the stairs, where Finn was currently pulling that fleshy, blood-soaked monster through the snow. We watched him give it a harsh kick when it began to wiggle and groan, then make a quick detour at the shed to grab a fireman's axe. I looked away before I saw what happened next, but the wet thud and the shriek that came after told me all I needed to know. "Don't feel bad," I said as I nudged Daniel's arm. I sniffled again. "That bastard ate our neighbors." When I got back into the tower, I found evidence of our little distraction. Everything was left on the desk where it was before, but our chairs were toppled over. The security camera monitor was just white noise. Something probably ripped it off. I grabbed one of the cups of cocoa on the desk, noticing a strange smell and color from inside. The warm brown liquid was replaced with a dark, swirling void that almost looked like a night sky. A glittering purple hue spinning clockwise, even as I held it completely still. Before Daniel could see it, I marched both cups over to the fire escape and gave them each a solid baseball pitch into the woods, one after the other. They disappeared between the snow-covered trees, the shatter too far away to hear. Daniel said in mock protest. Hold on a second. That is UPS, so hold on. Hello. Hello. Let them drop off whatever the fuck they're dropping off. They're usually pretty quick, so. Which is great, because I'm at the end of this chapter, and I would really like to finish it. All right. Yes, okay, thank you. Please leave. Fantastic, love it. Scan it, please go. Good. GG's. Bye. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Extra emphasis, goodbye. For goodbye. Okay, where was I? There we go. Okay. Daniel said in mock protest. My response was delayed. I was weaving on the spot, my brain slow and fuzzy, like a dead in-between station. "I'll get you a new one," I finally said in a dull, monotone voice. It was another one of those moments when Daniel didn't need to say anything. I didn't either. As I stood at the railing and looked down over the snowy treetops, He gave me a moment of silence. Then, after I took one long, deep breath, he wrapped his arms around my shoulders from behind and held me in a firm, steady grip. We stood like that for a while. I wasn't sure if it was because he needed a hug too, or if he just didn't want to make good on his promise to help Finn dismember that body. Cool. All right. So I need to pick up I need to go pick up Mr. Holmes. So I'm going to have to end this stream, which is fine because I really need to eat dinner too. So I may or may not stream the last 3 chapters. That will be chapter 14, 15, and 16. So I'm sorry. I know. Be upset at me. It's fine. My bigger thing is just making sure that everything is handled accordingly. I'm going to leave you in the exceedingly capable hands of Stinky Treen, who is currently streaming Indicopia. So be kind, say hello, tell them that I am sending much, much love. But yeah, I just want to make sure that you guys are obviously entertained. But with that said, I appreciate you all joining me with everything. I do have some new drops happening. AutumnIvyOfficial.com, of course, as always, for photosets, audios, videos, and more, and AutumnIvy.com for merch. So, but I'll let you know for sure if I decide or not to stream more. I think I kind of just want to stream, or I think I kind of just want to get this done, and that way it's finished. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me. Please remember that you can support Win directly at kelbyron.com. Also, the audiobook for the first book is available, though we do need to do some revamps, but go hang out with Stinky Treen. Okay, I love you. Bye. Drink water, hydrate, take your grandma's goldfish for a walk. Be kind to each other, more importantly. You great.